They say that 60 is the new 40, but I don't believe it. Only those who believe it live in a fantasy world, and I've met a lot of them lately. Reality hit me right in the eye when I turned 7. I learned that there was no Santa Claus or Easter Bunny, let alone the Tooth Fairy. She had died the year before. I've lived almost 60 years, and sometimes it feels like every day. I can still do many of the things I could do in my 20s or 30s, like run a marathon, but I do it much slower than I did then. Are there any regrets in my life? Who doesn't have regrets? But after much reflection, I finally realized what it was all about. If you mull over the what-ifs instead of saying, I can, you might get into an oak box and call it a day. And I'm not ready for that yet. So I get up every morning, go to work and give 100%, because that's what they pay me to do. I estimate that I have a little over 9 years left before I retire, and I can do almost anything I want. Will I make any changes in my life? Hell yes. I think the first thing I'll do is move out of that damn retirement village my wife talked me into moving to a couple months ago. You see, she's taken early retirement and is having the time of her life here, and I hate the place more and more every day. Will I change my mind? Who knows, maybe I'll even do it sooner, with or without my wife Sarah. Only time will tell. We had a great house. It was 95 years old and it was listed on our town's historical register. True, there were a few pain-in-the-ass things to abide by, but owning a historic home adds nothing but value to it. The little bronze plaque on the front of the house states who the original owners were and the date of construction, and we are only the second owners. Over the last 20 years, we have rewired, updated the plumbing to bring the house up to 21st century standards, but left the exterior facade alone, so at least from the outside it still looks original. 2 years before the sale, we repainted the house using the 3 original Victorian colors. It turned out very nice, especially with the white hedge at the front of the house. The only problem we encountered was the need for a new roof. We had a long discussion with the city officials about which shingles would be suitable for our house, as they no longer manufactured the one that was on the house originally. Eventually, they approved our choice, and I decided that was the last thing I was going to do to it. So, with only 5 years left on the mortgage, I decided the house was available. I had no idea the plans were already in the works, and if I had known, I would still be living in that house. And where would my wife be? Who the hell knows? How she talked me into selling our jewelry and moving to this place is still a mystery to me. She must have slipped something into my beer. That's the only thing I can claim. Don't get me wrong, this place is almost new, but it's half the size of our old house. However, with the kids leaving, we no longer needed the 4 bedrooms, but the quality is far below what I'm used to. It looks nice, but is by no means as sturdy. I had plastered walls and ceilings, and now it's at best half-inch drywalls with ugly textured ceilings. It looks like the damn popcorn they used to use in the 70s. The appliances are a step up from what we had, but who needs a gourmet oven and stove? For the 2 of us who cook here a lot, a microwave and stove are enough. A dishwasher is nice, but a refrigerator is something out of Star Wars. I don't need 2 kinds of water or 3 kinds of ice cubes. And how often am I going to leave a message for my wife on the recorder in the door? Give me my old refrigerator that had a built-in ice maker and kept my beer cold and I'll be happy. Oh well, looks like I'm stuck for the long haul, but not for long. When Sarah's 2 best friends sold their houses and moved to Temple Gardens last year, she was shocked. They were still only 20 minutes away by car, but the way she talked, you'd think they'd moved halfway across the country. My wife worked for the school system, so when she had enough points, years of service combined with age, she agreed to early retirement. The only condition was that she not continue to spend money like she did at work, because in retirement she was only making a little more than half of what she was getting. It went on like that for the whole 9 months. Then all I heard was that she needed new sports and casual outfits. I always thought she looked good in her shorts and t-shirts. Admittedly, I knew next to nothing about fashion, but I soon learned. While shorts and t-shirts could be bought at Walmart, casual outfits came from malls or small boutiques with big price tags. When she started spending days with her old friends in their new homes, I was happy for her. When they got Sarah involved with dancing, playing tennis, golf, and other social activities, I was a little worried. But when I came home to an empty house and with a damning note saying my dinner was in the microwave or oven, I got angry. Sarah, do I really not want you home to have dinner with me anymore? Steve, I knew I was going to be late, so I made sure your dinner was ready before I left for Connie's. Tell me, for goodness sake, what was so important at Connie's that you had to be there before 8:34? I looked at my watch. 8:34? I asked. Our dance group was performing in the town square at 6 p.m., and I just had to be there. You don't want me to let them down, do you? Sarah, I don't care about your dance group, your golf or tennis friends until it starts affecting my life. What you do during the day is up to you, but when I come home after a day of work, I don't like being greeted by a damn note on the microwave. Steve, that's kind of rude. Rude or not, I don't appreciate it. And if it was the first time, I wouldn't even say anything, but it's happening more and more often. Why don't you just move into Connie's or Judy's spare room, for Christ's sake? I said, trying to contain my anger, but to no avail. Look, I'm sorry, and I promise it won't happen again. Why didn't you eat and join us? The last time I tried to do that, your group moved from place to place twice, and you didn't return your damn calls. I'm not going to look all over the place for my deadbeat wife. Well, I'm already home, so why don't I get us both a glass of wine while you shower upstairs? It was her way of telling me that tonight would be my lucky night. And it was a great night. Life was good, but most of all, it was easy being married to Sarah. After so many years together, we had a tendency to finish each other's sentences, and I felt like I always knew exactly what she was thinking. I found out later that I was very wrong about that. When we started hanging out with her friends from Temple Gardens, I just went along for the ride. Dinners, barbecues, shopping trips, and weekend getaways all made us a more cohesive group. When two other couples joined us and we started attending events at town squares, I was clueless. Heck, car shows, art fairs, and cooking events were all things I enjoyed. I wasn't much of a dancer, so when the music came on and people started dancing, I did my usual 3 slow dances and watched Sarah kick back the heels of one group or the other. Was I ever jealous? Not in my life. I knew that if I didn't let her out, she'd pester me to death, so I went with the flow. Well, at first anyway. Things came to a head when one Saturday night they all wanted to go to a restaurant in one of the town squares. Someone had made a reservation for 10 people, and when we got there, the maitre d' wouldn't let us in. I guess this restaurant was only open to people who actually lived in Temple Gardens. Our group said we were their guests, but he flatly refused to seat us. Come on, Sarah, we're out of here. I wouldn't give them our business even if they got on their knees and begged me. The other couples apologized and I told them it wasn't their fault and not to worry about us. We'd be sure to find something to eat elsewhere. Steve, if we lived there, we wouldn't have to worry about this, she said, sensing I was leaving. If pigs flew, I'd always have ribs, but that's not going to happen either. Our house will never sell in a recession, and if it does, we'll lose our ass. Besides, there are a lot of restrictions out there that I don't know if I can live with. We ate the rest of dinner in silence. For about a month, nothing happened. We were still meeting with the same group, give or take a couple people, and then it happened. Steve, what would you say if I told you we had a buyer for our house? An excited Sarah asked when I walked in the door Friday night. Whose house and what buyer? I was confused. You know, we always get flyers saying this or that house is sold in your neighborhood, and if you're interested, call this realtor or that one. So I called one that came in the mail a couple weeks ago, and he did an appraisal on our house. He said that a lot of people are looking for houses like ours, and that we can get top dollar even in this falling market. Sarah, it didn't even occur to you to ask me if I wanted to sell the house? Steve, I just looked at how much our house is worth and, dreamed about it. Dreaming means thinking about what it would be like if, and you've gone much farther than that. Okay, I did, but he called this morning and said he had 2 interested couples and he'd like to give them a tour this weekend. Isn't that great? Sometimes there are no simple words, you know that? Are you out of your mind? Why do I want to sell? I love this house. This started an intense 4-hour discussion about why I should do this. I have to hand it to her. She made some solid arguments. The girl had done her homework. The amount of money we'd get from the sale of the house would more than pay for everything we'd replace, and we could put the rest in the bank to create a nice mortgage. Our current house was too big for the 2 of us, and the utilities alone were costing us about $400 a month because we had old wooden double-paned windows and no insulation in the walls. The yard required a lot of upkeep, and our neighborhood was getting older. Sarah, this is a historic neighborhood. It's supposed to be old. Steve, when you retire, will you want to maintain this house? The house will need to be painted in a couple years, and wouldn't it be nice to have something new that we wouldn't have to worry about? I know you like it here, but don't you at least want to just think about it and see what we can buy? Saturday morning, we met with the realtor. He showed us comparables and what he thought would be a good price. He said he had two offers and that it could be ready in 2 months. When I asked how much he was charging for the sales commission, I gasped. When I told him it would be 2% less or nothing at all, we finally agreed on 1.25. Why don't we see what Temple Gardens has? I'm sure our friends will show us around. Yeah, I'm damn sure they will, I thought to myself. I went in the other direction. At the Temple Gardens sales office, I saw a large plane on the wall. It was huge, like a huge city looming over 3 different counties. He said they already had their 9th expansion and had gotten enough property for 3 more. This is the largest residential development of its kind outside of Sun City, Arizona. We have 16 golf courses, 28 tennis courts, 6 man-made lakes, and 2 town squares with stores and restaurants. In addition, we have every medical facility known to man within a 5-minute drive and 3 business complexes, and next year we are breaking ground on our own hospital. Once you move here, you won't have to go anywhere else to get what you need. We're practically self-sufficient. The only thing I didn't like from the beginning was that only one real estate office was authorized to sell all new and used properties. And the list of restrictions seemed to go on endlessly. I tried not to be negative, but it looked like the developer still had a hand in every aspect of this community. He must be cashing in on it. When he asked what we were looking for, Sarah brought out a typewritten list. Like I said, she had done her homework. We looked at the models, and while they looked nice, there was nothing special about them. When he asked what price range we were aiming for, I said no more than $175,000, which would save us almost $80,000. He talked about what he had in that range and the general location in the complex. Steve, this apartment is only 3 blocks from Judy's house. How convenient, I thought to myself sarcastically. Let's go look at this one, she said, smiling. At least this house wasn't as sterile as the models. It had a few nice little things and even a hot tub in the small patio. But it still seemed small to me, and everyone thought I was crazy when I asked to see the attic. It's not really an attic, the realtor explained. It's more like the space between the ceiling joists. I just want to see how much insulation there is, I told him. There was only 6 inches of blown-in fiber insulation. I immediately discovered 2 more problems, and worry appeared on my face. This is a used house. It's bound to have a few problems, he told me while taking notes. Does this house come with any kind of warranty? And are the owners willing to fix any problems? Mr. Moore, I'll have to answer that question for you after I check with them. But most owners are usually willing to work with potential buyers. I told him I wanted to see at least 3 more properties. He showed us 3 more in about the same condition, and one with a price tag $30,000 higher. This one appealed to my taste. I guess the saying, you get what you pay for, is true, at least in this case. After about 4.5 hours of running around, he invited us to dinner. We discussed price and location, and when I said I would pay cash, his eyes lit up. Perhaps we can negotiate on one of the older models we currently have in stock in the town square area. They usually have all the necessary upgrades and are sold with the furniture, he said, licking his lips. Well, for the right price, my wife and I are willing to do anything. The house was 3 blocks from the first town square built. It was a model, but it had been rented out time and again over the past 5 years. The house came with a 2-year warranty on appliances, as well as the usual workmanship warranty. The home had 2 bedrooms, 2 full baths, and a small den or TV room. The kitchen was open to the large family room, so it seemed much larger. Along with the 2-car garage, everything we wanted and needed was here except the pool. You could put in a small pool, I was told, but the building code requires it be enclosed with a screen. It was the first of many moments that would affect my skin and eventually make me hate living here. But at the time, everything looked pretty good. Over the next week, Sarah, Judy, Connie, and their husbands went out of their way to tell me what a great place it was. The realtor kept asking if I needed any more information, and that he had 2 other couples considering the places he was showing us. I finally made up my mind. If Sarah was going to spend all her time here anyway, I should be in walking distance to find her when I got home from work. 2 months later, our old house was gone, and we moved into the new one. I arranged for them to repaint the kitchen and family room a pale coral color. We ended up having a garage sale to throw out all of our unwanted furniture. Even after signing the contract, I learned that yard sales are not allowed in the new place. Even though the daily commute to work took 20 minutes, it was even better than I could have imagined. Sarah was unabashedly happy, and I spent the first couple months enjoying her fruits almost every night. At one point, I even had to tell her I had a headache. The first major problem came when she wanted a golf cart. Everyone, and I mean everyone, had golf carts. The whole place was lined with golf cart lanes, and in the evening there were 10 times as many of them as there were cars on the road. We had 2 cars, and one of the restrictions was that neither car could be left outside the garage in the driveway. So if we got a golf cart, I would have to do something about one of my cars. Steve, why don't you sell your Mustang? You hardly ever drive it, and we'll use the golf cart 90% of the time. There's no way I'm selling my car. It's a classic, for heaven's sake. It was the first Cobra Mustang they ever built. I'll find a place to store it, but I'm not getting rid of it. Women can be so stupid sometimes. Storage cost me almost $100 a month, but it was worth it. More often than not, after dinner, Sarah wanted to walk to the town square, listen to music, or go shopping. It was fun at first, but over time it turned into an excuse to get dinner over with before bed. Sarah still danced every night. We made new friends daily, but as I said, I danced a couple slow dances and then watched her dance off. The first night I realized that the town square and all the events openly sold alcohol. I guess since people drove golf carts instead of cars, they thought they could drink as much as they wanted, and many did. I don't know how many accidents happened each night, but judging by the way people were gorging themselves on booze, there must have been at least a few. So while Sarah danced, I drank. That's how I met Esther. I was sipping a Miller Lite, watching my wife dance with the band, when an elderly woman in a wheelchair next to me dropped her beer. "Damn, could you pick it up for me?" she asked. "No problem," I said, picking up the beer and wiping the top of the bottle. "Oh, no. Don't worry, the alcohol will kill any germs that are on it," she said with a smile, taking a big gulp. "And if it doesn't, I'm already 87 years old, and I certainly don't expect to live forever." "Well, since most of it's spilled, why don't I get you a fresh one?" I said, standing up. "Just make sure it's not light beer. I don't want to drink diluted rabbit piss if I don't have to." I laughed and headed for the bar. "Here you go, a cold bud." I sat back down, taking the empty bottle from her and handing her a full bottle and glass. "No need for any damn glasses," she said, clutching our bottles together. Taking a small sip, she sighed. "That was just the thing. My name is Esther. Esther Thurman. What's yours?" "Steve Moore. My wife Sarah and I moved here a couple months ago." "And where's your wife today?" "She's dancing over there, fourth from the left in the yellow sundress," I said, pointing to her group. "That's a nice wife you have. Been married long?" 38 years this September." "And why don't you dance with her?" "I'm not much of a dancer except to slow songs. My husband Carl, rest his soul, couldn't dance, but he tried. Hell, I thought he broke his toes more than once. Luckily his hip started bothering him, or I'd have been crippled a lot sooner," she said, taking another long sip of beer. "Son, you better go easy on that or you'll never get home." "I've taken care of that. See that black woman over there?" she said, pointing to a group of women talking. "That's my nurse. She brings me here every night, puts me next to the music, and leaves to visit. Every now and then she comes back to see if I need anything, and she visits me until the music stops. Then she comes back to my place and soon goes to bed. So if I get drunk and pee my pants, she just hoses me down and puts me to bed. Not the best life in the world, but at least I'm still on my feet. Well, here's to being upright." I grinned, touching the bottles again. "Are you fooling around?" A question that came out of nowhere, sending beer up my nose as I coughed, trying to draw in air. "For God's sake, don't die in front of me," Esther said, as she watched me come to my senses. I blew my nose into my handkerchief and tried to pull myself together. "What kind of question is that? And no, I don't want to fool around with you, Esther." "Well, a lot of people here are from that generation who were faithful to their spouses all their lives, raised their kids, worked all their lives, and by the time they retired, bored each other to death. They decided now was the time to let their hair down and taste the forbidden fruit." "Here?" "Jesus, Esther, no pun intended. This place is like a geriatric ward in a hospital," I whispered, but was shocked by her statement. Well, there may be snow on the mountain, but there's a fire raging below, she replied to me, as she finished her beer and motioned for the nurse to bring another. How many beers do you drink a night? I usually stop at 3, but tonight, since you're buying me a drink, I'll have 4. My record is 6, but that was last New Year's Eve and I passed out at about 10:15. That bitch never woke me up. I missed the fireworks. Last time I do that? After 5 minutes, the music stopped and Sarah walked over to where I was sitting. Esther, this is my wife Sarah, and this is my new good friend Esther. Nice to meet you, Esther, my wife said as she extended her hand to Esther. You look good. Are you sure she's only 56? Hell, you don't look a day older than 45. I rolled my eyes and my wife blushed. Well, Esther, it's time for us to leave. I hope to see you again, I said, holding out my wife's hand. I'm here every night, so unless that fat nurse smothers me with a pillow, I'll see you again. Where did you find her? My wife asked quietly as we left. She was there when I went to sit down. I hope at 87 I'll be as energetic as she is. Thus began my relationship with Esther. She was only 87, she wore her silver-white thinning hair on top of her head, and although she was no more than 5 feet 2 inches tall, she probably weighed 150 pounds. She had moved to Temple Gardens with her husband when he sold his business in New Jersey. They were on the first floor and were entitled to everything that others began paying for years later. As she explained, their first residence was nothing more than a 2-story cabin, but years later they moved into, as she put it, a real house. She had seen the community go from 200 homes to over 20,000. She knew more about what was going on than the community newspaper, something I learned about sooner than I would have liked. Her goal in life was to enjoy life to the fullest every day and live to 90, and every year after that was just gravy, she told me. I saw her every evening when we went to the town square. On each occasion, I tried to buy her a beer. We talked about life, dreams, and most of all gossiped about what was going on in society. How she found out about everyone, I have no idea. And even though at times I thought she was talking complete nonsense, I ate crow more than once. Ma'am, is this seat taken? I asked, holding 2 mugs of beer and approaching Esther's wheelchair. Don't give me that shit, ma'am, and sit your ass down. What do I look like, a damn Southern belle? I smiled. She smiled back and picked up one of the beers. Is your wife with you tonight? Sure, she's over there with that group over there in Western Wear. I pointed to Sarah and about 9 others. You might want to keep an eye on your wife when she's with someone in that group. I don't mean to say there's anything going on there, just that some of the guys have a reputation among the ladies. Esther, they must be in their 70s or so. I think I could kick their asses all at once, I said, puffing up my chest. Okay, smart ass. Just don't come crying to me if anything happens. Nothing will happen, trust me. I looked at her, and she was ready to burst. Okay, what have you got? Her eyes got really big, and a huge smile appeared on her face. You better go get a refill, because this is a tale of 2 beers. I walked over to the bar and grabbed a Corona for myself and a Bud for her. Okay, what do you know about this band? She looked around and leaned closer. They all do it in this group. I looked at her. You've got to be kidding me, right? Some of these guys look too old to even get turned on, I hummed. Steve, looks can be deceiving. The streets used to wind down at 9 o'clock and everyone went home to bed. Now everyone goes home to bed, but usually with other people's wives. I looked at the group that was now doing some kind of dance. How the hell do you know that? See that tall, skinny guy with the black hair? Well, he wears makeup every 3 weeks. He's a retired banker from somewhere up north and lost his wife shortly after moving here. He has a nice pension, a nice car, and he pampers the ladies with wine and dinner. I stared at him for a moment. It's not a big deal. He still has hair, but he's definitely not Don Juan. Steve, in this community there are 2 or 3 single women for every guy. These widows are willing to cut each other's throats to get this guy. He's good looking, he's got money, and he can still score with meat. What more could a woman ask for? I started to interrupt her to tell her she was wrong, but she stopped me. See that bald guy with the earring? He works out at the gym 4 hours a day. He's probably in the best shape of his life, and half the women here, married or not, would jump him in a heartbeat. And I hear he's hung like a horse. She giggled like a girl and finished her first beer, adding, He's married, but rumor has it his wife swings both ways, if you know what I mean. This was getting to be too much. I'm going to have to interrupt you, girl. The beer is clogging up your brain. Steve, I can name probably half the people here and tell you where they live. I may be old and not see like I used to, but I've got two good ears, and they hear a lot when people think nobody's listening. I just can't imagine this place being Sodom and Gomorrah for old people. At that, she laughed. Steve, we may be old people, but we're not dead yet. Most people have nothing but free time, and they're looking for something new and exciting to fill those hours. It's not like any of them are going to get pregnant. I sat down and started looking at all the groups of people. There were some in their 50s among them, but most were much older, not counting the tourists. No way, I thought to myself. But Esther has never been wrong about anything yet. Okay, let's say I believe you. Do you think they would molest my wife while I'm sitting here? Yes, you're still working, aren't you? A little tennis match in the morning, a trip to the pool to cool off, and maybe a cold drink or two, and they'd be on her like stink on shit. She's fresh meat. Hell, most of the women here have been in the house so many times before. But every new couple that moves in here is a challenge. What else do the men here have to think about? Did I believe her? Not really, but I decided to keep my eyes open like I used to. If they wanted to move in with my wife, I'd put a stop to it before they even started. Why don't we stay in our own damn house? We still socialized with her friends and 4 other couples we were introduced to. After about 4 months, I noticed that Judy and Connie started acting strange around me. They were Sarah's friends, but they never once looked me in the eye unless it was necessary. Honey, did I do something to make Judy and Connie angry? They seem to avoid me when we're all together. Did you say something to their husbands? We talk mostly about stuff like sports and politics, and I don't even mention our wives. Well, you're probably making all that up. Just don't worry about it, and maybe I'll say something to them. 2 weeks later, we gathered in the town square. I danced a few medleys with Sarah before letting her go with our group. Grabbing 2 beers, I went in search of Esther. How come you're keeping me away? Found some other old broad to take my place? She asked, smiling, and reached for her beer. I sat down in the chair next to her and replied, Esther, you know you're irreplaceable. If I were a few years younger, I'd show you what sweet talk can accomplish. I see you didn't heed my warning, she said, pointing her beer at our group. Esther, this isn't a dance band. These are our old friends from where we used to live. I don't care who they are. They're in the same band. They moved here a year and a half ago and have been switching wives for the last 9 months. I think you're wrong on that point, girl. Wouldn't you like to make a little bet? You know, a little wager on the side if you're so sure. I don't want to take your money. Hell, with the way you drink, you'll need everything you've saved up, I said, laughing. Go ahead and laugh, you stupid shit. All I'm saying is that your friends are from the same band. Okay, how do we prove which one of us is right? First, we should make a bet, shouldn't we? How about 1 beer a night? You buy me 1 beer a night whenever you see me here. Esther, I still do that. I know, but I'm letting you. That way you'll owe me and I won't feel so bad about it. Do you feel bad about accepting beer from me? Hell no, I just said that to make you feel bad about trying to take advantage of an old lady. She laughed, taking a sip of the last glass of Bud. Okay, I'll agree to your terms, but we still need to find a way to prove or disprove what you said. Steve, have I been wrong yet? Why can't we just say I'm right and you can go get us a couple more beers? What if we say I'm right because I've known them a lot longer and have been dating them for the last couple years, I suggested. We've even been to parties they've thrown and no one's ever approached me. What about your wife? You say she's known them forever. Why would they approach you when they can talk to her? Maybe they don't even want you to know what they're doing. Have you ever thought about that? I started to remember how and why we moved here. I just can't imagine my wife behaving this way. Whose idea was it to move here? And didn't you say those couples moved here first and talked your wife into following them? I didn't like where this conversation was going. Esther, are you saying that my wife lied to convince me to move here? Steve, I'm not saying anything like that. All I'm saying is that she wanted to stay close to her good friend. Maybe she didn't know they had found a new way of life, but now she had to know. Esther, we have a wonderful life and she doesn't need to go outside of our marriage to get satisfaction. Steve, it's not for satisfaction or all that. It's for the thrill of doing something you shouldn't do and not getting caught. A lot of wives here have caught their husbands doing something weird. Most forgive them because what alternatives could they have? In most cases, the husbands make all the money, and even if they get a 50-50 share, they can't live the way they live now. All their friends are here. They have built a new life here. Why would they risk losing it all for a walk in the hayloft? So they turn a blind eye or join in. Very few break up, unfortunately. The only ones I've seen are when a wife cheats on her husband. Men are much less lenient, and why not? They dump the cheating whore and then pick on all the single women here after that. Esther, they may be part of the group, but not my wife. I've known her most of my life, and she would never do that to me. Not even in a million years. I hope you're right, she said, finishing her bud. You're too nice a guy to get screwed, but I've seen plenty of the same. I need a beer. Do you want one? Do you really need to ask that question? She replied, holding out her empty mug to me. I looked back at the group who were laughing, dancing, and continuing to have fun. She had to be wrong. I took 2 beers, gave the bartender a few bucks, and headed back to where Esther was sitting. I could see that she was watching my wife's group, talking to the women on the other side of her. It looked like all the older women were watching, waiting, and keeping their ears open. It looked like I was going to have to do the same. The music is almost over. I hope I haven't upset you too much, she said, as she swallowed the first bite. It's a bet I don't want to win, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm never wrong. I'll bet dollars to donuts that she asks you if you want to go back to one of their houses tonight. I've seen them whispering for the last 5 minutes, and from the way they've been looking at their watches, it looked like they were planning something for later. Maybe she's going to tell you about it tonight to see what your reaction is. From the way I'm feeling right now, I don't think that would be a good idea. Steve, there's no need to freak out because, like I said, I could be wrong. And for heaven's sake, don't lose your temper, don't do anything stupid, and don't go to jail. I like having you around, and besides, if I'm right, I have plans for you. Honey, are you ready yet? Said Sarah, walking over to where we were sitting. How are you doing today, Esther? Keeping my husband out of trouble? Honey, I think he's keeping me in line, unfortunately. Steve, the band is moving the party to Connie and Mike's house, and they asked if we wanted to go with them. Do you want to go? It might be fun. You want to go? I asked, looking over to Esther. Steve, let's go. It's early, and you won't have to get up for work tomorrow. Sure, honey. If that's what you want to do, then we'll go. Esther, I hope to see you tomorrow, I told her as I was getting ready to leave. Steve, remember what I told you, she yelled back at me as soon as I was out of sight. We walked back to our house to get a golf cart because their house was about a mile away. Sarah was the talkative one, and I sat in silence and just drove. Connie and Mike's house was a step below the one we bought. However, they had enclosed their patio and put in a hot tub. Judy and Bill's house was only 2 blocks away and was almost a mirror image of Connie's house, except they had a small pool. By the time we arrived, there were 5 other couples there. Each had a drink in their hand, and they were just chatting amongst themselves. Maybe Esther was wrong. My wife had gone somewhere else. Mike brought me a beer and started talking about how screwed up some of the new restrictions were and that a group of people were putting together a petition to fight them. I agree that there are things that need to be regulated to keep real estate values up, but I think the developer went overboard with some of them, I said, looking around the party for my wife. Steve, I couldn't agree with you more, he said, lighting a cigarette. It was just an ordinary party until the music started playing and people started dancing. Like I said, I'm not a dancer and was just sitting there sipping a beer when it finally came to me. No one dances with their own wife. I immediately checked the band looking for Sarah. I saw that she was dancing with the husband of one of the other wives. I think his name was Carl. It looked innocent, but I wondered how long it would last. Bill walked over and handed me a fresh beer. You got everything you need, Steve? He asked. I couldn't take my eyes off Sarah and Carl. When Bill mentioned how good my wife looked tonight, I put an end to any plans anyone might have had for us. Well, Bill, it's time for Sarah and I to leave, I said loud enough for not only him to hear, but everyone else in hearing range. I have to get my fiancée home before she drinks too much and does something stupid, I said, as I watched Carl's hand start to wander. Maybe next time we can get together at our house. I handed him my full mug of beer and walked over to my wife. Come on, Sarah, we're leaving, I said, gently taking her hand and leading her toward the exit. But Steve, we just got here and I'm having a great time. Well, you have a choice now, don't you? You can stay here with your good friends or you can come home with me right now. The choice is yours. She looked at me for about 15 seconds before she realized that I should know something was going on. I'm going home with you. Good choice, I said, leading her to the front door. I'm sorry we can't stay, but Sarah is tired and I need to take her home. Maybe next time we can stay longer. When Connie saw the look in my eyes, she realized it was best not to say anything contradictory. Connie touched my arm and said, "No problem, Steve. Just drive carefully. There are a lot of drunks around here at this time." I smiled and we drove out of there. Why do you suddenly want to leave? I was having a good time there. Let me make it simple for you. I didn't like the way you danced with Carl. His arms were all around you, and you must have had too much to drink tonight because you didn't move them. I didn't want to make a scene, punch him in the face, or break his damn arms, so I figured it would be safer if we just left. Steve, he wasn't really doing anything that scary. And, honey, if I did that to his wife, you'd explode, wouldn't you? I watched for her reaction, but it didn't take long for her to react. I guess you're right. Maybe I had a little too much to drink. Well, that being said, it's still pretty early, and when we get home, I might dance with you and get you in the mood to make love tonight. I squeezed her hand. Or maybe we'll park on the far side of the town square and I'll take you in the back of the golf cart. After all, we haven't christened it yet. Eventually, we got home and got on with it, but to no avail at best. It seemed like she was just doing all the action. I think this was the first time Sarah realized that I wasn't going to join her new group of friends. Now it was up to me to find out if she had crossed the line before last night. I really hoped she hadn't, but judging by the way she was acting today, I wouldn't deny her. Sunday morning at breakfast was a little awkward. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with her touching yesterday, and that if this continued, we would have to find new friends. Steve, it was probably just the alcohol. I can imagine the pain Carl got from his wife when they got home. Nice comeback, I thought to myself. And since I'm going shopping with Connie and Judy today, I'll mention it to them too. I didn't know you were going out today? Don't you remember I told you about it last week? They're having a 50% off sale at Kohl's and all the wives are going there. Well, I was hoping to spend some quiet time with you today. We already did that last night, if you remember correctly. But maybe I'll get something special to spend this evening in the best way possible. I thought about following her, but decided against it. If she catches me, what the hell am I going to say? I needed some kind of plan because there was no way I was going to pay some private eye to follow my wife while I was at work. The internet is a wonderful tool, and you can find just about anything on it if you know where to look. The GPS tracking monitor cost $100. I added 2 phone taps and a base station for $75 and a system with 2 cameras and a voice recorder that cost me another $155. So even though it wasn't a Cadillac system with Blu-ray quality pictures and surround sound, for less than $350 I could be worried about my wife or find out if she was doing something she shouldn't be doing. Shortly before 5 o'clock, my wife returned with packages in hand. I had already prepared dinner, steaks on the grill, potatoes in the oven, and salad in the refrigerator. I told her to set the table. She kept talking about the great deals and said I would see one of her purchases tonight. Dinner was delicious, and she was the one who suggested we go to the town square to finish our dinner. Music was playing, and there were lots of people. I danced 4 songs in a row with her, 2 of them even fast, before I told her we had to go. I grabbed 2 beers and went to find Esther. I thought you were going to set me up tonight, she said, snatching the bud out of my hands. What about Miss? Do you think she's fumbling away from you? Esther, I haven't heard her called that in 20 years, I said with a smile. I guess I'm not up on the new terminology, but cheating by any other name means the same thing. I suppose if she could talk you into it, it wouldn't be technical cheating. Well, I'm still not sure about her, but by next week I'll be sure. By Tuesday, I'll have all the monitoring devices installed, and I'll find out for sure, one way or another. And what will you do if things turn out badly? I haven't gotten that far ahead of myself yet. I'm taking one step at a time. We've been together for over 35 years, and I can't imagine life without her. Well, you can always swing with her. I cast her a disapproving glance. Or, if not Sarah, you could take me with you. Hell, I haven't had fun in a million years, and I could probably show these guys a thing or two if they didn't kill me first. She laughed, and I laughed until I looked up and saw my wife dancing with some guy. I hoped I could hold out until I found out. Walking back to our house, Sarah was holding onto my hand. It was like we were newlyweds again. When the alarm clock rang, I didn't feel like getting up, and I thought a couple times about calling in sick to work and spending the day in bed with my wife. But damn it, I got up. I'm not 20 anymore, and after the second time, I'd be limping and probably sore, and she'd try to talk me into going shopping with her. For the sake of my pocketbook, I went to work. Sitting at my desk on Monday, I kept thinking about the fact that there was no way my wife could do what Esther was suggesting. Even if she had been acting a little weird lately, that didn't make her part of the group, for heaven's sake, even if all her old friends were doing it. That sour feeling in my gut was getting stronger by the day, but at least it would all be over one way or another, and very soon. At least that's what I hoped. Chapter 2. An Overheard Conversation. On Tuesday, all of my belongings arrived at work. I unpacked them, read the instructions, and told my wife I was going to be a little late and to go to the town square without me. Yes, ma'am. Kids, go ahead and I'll meet you there when I get home from work. Are you sure? I can wait for you if you want. No, go ahead and enjoy yourself, but not too much, I laughed. Okay, just don't take too long. I got home at the usual time, and the first thing I did was attach a GPS to her golf cart. Then I put wiretaps on the phones in the kitchen and bedroom and video cameras in the bedroom and living room. I hid the receivers in the garage behind a box on the workbench and hooked them up to our home computer in the living room. The cameras worked fine, and I called the home phone from my cell phone to check the phones. So far, I was pleased with the results. In half an hour, I had bugged my own home and set in motion what I hoped would not be the end of my marriage. I had remote access from my laptop and could connect to anything as long as my home computer was on. I waited another 10 minutes, changed my clothes, and headed to the town square. It was packed, as it was every night. From about 5 o'clock until about 9 o'clock, the square was packed with everyone in town. The only time it was quiet here was when it was raining, and Florida doesn't get rain in the evenings. I saw Sarah and a group dancing in the plaza and noticed Esther talking to two older ladies to the left of the DJ. I grabbed 2 beers and headed over to where Esther was sitting. I saw Ms. come up alone. Thought maybe something had happened to you. I was busy bugging my damn house, I told her with anger in my voice. Steve, sometimes it's better to be blind and stupid if you know what I mean, she said with a concerned look on her face. You're my friend, and I don't want to lose you. She squeezed my hand and looked sad for the first time since I'd known her. I'd rather know one way or the other, because not knowing drives me crazy. I just don't want you to lose your way and do something stupid. I have plans for you, and they don't include bailing you out of jail or anything worse. Hell, maybe we're both wrong and she's still the girl you married once upon a time. She looked at me, and we both realized deep down that she wasn't. Sarah approached me more than once to dance with her, and like a good husband, I did it with a smile, even if I made a fool of myself in the public square in front of God and everyone. Finally, around 8:30 we got back to our house. We didn't make love, as I had too much on my mind and probably wouldn't have been able to commit to it anyway. She asked if everything was okay, and I just kissed her gently and told her I loved her. I fell asleep, or at least tried to fall asleep. There was nothing out of the ordinary on either Wednesday or Thursday. She must have talked to a dozen people, making plans for one event or another. She was a very busy woman. I watched her get up in the morning and get dressed after her shower, and I really wished I was home with her. She had coffee with a few of her friends, and then left and was gone most of the day. Friday at lunch, I decided to check out what she was up to. I watched her sleep and wished I was lying next to her. She then went to the bathroom to take a shower. While she was in the shower, I heard the phone ring. It was Judy. She had left a message for me to call her. Watching her get dressed, I noted again that she still looked great after all these years. Shorts, tank top, and sandals are the uniform of the day, seemingly every day. The camera in the living room was pointed toward the kitchen, and I realized she was having coffee and a bagel when she started tapping her messages. Among them were 2 from groups she was a member of and a short one from Judy that simply asked her to call her. I paused the video and went to get a cup of coffee in the dining room. As I went to get my coffee, I thought about how our life had changed since the move. It had become more chaotic, at least for Sarah. It was like moving from a dairy farm in Wisconsin to the heart of New York City. It was fun at times, especially because of the variety of restaurants, but running around nonstop was not how I envisioned my retirement. The only thing I knew for sure was that when I retired, I would have my own cappuccino machine. The crap that was in the dining room left a lot to be desired. Back at my desk, I hit the play button and watched my wife eat breakfast while sipping my coffee. I almost turned it off because how long can you watch someone eat? Boring. I decided to leave it on for a few more minutes. When she picked up the phone, I had to switch from video to audio from the wiretap. Well, aren't technology marvels? Judy, it's Sarah. How are you? Just making sure you haven't forgotten about today. There was a pause. I'm not sure I'm going today, my wife told her. I told you Steve would never go for it. He's just not that kind of person and doesn't swing for it, so to speak. Judy laughed. Well, you still seem to be enjoying yourself, or so it seems every time we get together. And Carl has been all about you since last Thursday. Last Thursday was pretty crazy, wasn't it? I've never been with two guys before, and it was fun. Weird, but still fun. My heart began to sink into the abyss, listening to the two of them talking. Well, it's only going to be the six of us today. Connie and her husband have a doctor's appointment. Maybe we can get together at your place. I told you from day one that it wasn't going to happen here, and I haven't changed my mind, especially after the last party Steve was at. I love my husband to death, and I would never do that in our house. And well, then we'll meet again at my place. If you can come a little early, I could use some help getting ready. Judy sounded excited now. I cut the connection. For the next 2 hours, I did practically nothing but try to breathe. I hit the Do Not Disturb button on my work phone and turned off my cell phone. I should have gotten angry, screamed at the top of my lungs and rushed home to confront my wife. But in a way, I wasn't surprised. I acted as if someone close to me had died. Shock, sadness, and regret were all I felt. That damn Esther was right again. She had to have a crystal ball or be a damn witch to know what she knew about other people's business. Then I told my boss that I wasn't feeling well and needed to leave. He looked concerned because I probably had no color left on my face. It seemed like all the blood had drained out of my body and I could barely move. That must have been how I felt on life support. Looking at my watch, I didn't even want to think about what or who my wife was doing at that moment. I got in the car and just drove. Even on autopilot, I ended up in the neighborhood where we now lived. If I wasn't so upset, I probably would have driven to Judy's house and kicked everyone's ass, but what good would that have done me? A night in jail wouldn't give me the answers I really needed. I pulled into my driveway, got out of the car and stood in front of the house. I just couldn't get in. I found myself in the town square, sitting in a chair and sucking on some kind of drink. It was just over 4 when I got here, and it had to be at least 6:30 now. I must have been on my 4th mug of beer when I saw a wheelchair stop next to me. I'm sorry. Don't be. You have nothing to apologize for. Besides, as of tonight, I officially owe you a beer, I reminded her, and walked, or should I say slouched over to the open bar. A fresh bud for my lady, I said, with a deep bow. When I returned, Esther looked at me and asked, "How much have you had to drink already?" "Not that much," I quickly replied. Well, getting drunk isn't going to restore her virginity. I know, but after all these years, you'd think I'd seen and heard it all. Steve, she just got caught up in the excitement and was in the wrong company of people. Not everyone here changes wives and copulates with every man they meet. Look at me, I haven't been hit on in years. At least that brought a smile to my face. She doesn't know you know yet, does she? No, but if you leave my car in the middle of the driveway unlocked, she'll think something's wrong. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. It hasn't gotten to me yet. My biggest question is why. I've already guessed for how long. I know I keep saying this, but don't do anything stupid. I know you're not drunk yet, and I think you should leave it at that, at least for tonight. Hell, if you don't want to go home tonight, you can stay at my place. It's just Fat Lucy and me, and I have an extra bedroom, so you won't have to double up with me. Although Lucy might like it. Esther had a way of making me smile, and I liked that about her. I don't know what I'm going to do yet. The only thing I know for sure is that my life with her is over. You know she'll be looking for you here, don't you? Esther, I'm not hiding, especially from her. However, if she's smart, she'll keep her mouth shut. After drinking 5 beers, I considered having a sixth, but decided against it, at least for now. Well, my offer still stands if you need a place to stay. She handed me her address and phone number. My daughter is coming to visit for a couple weeks, but there's plenty of room for everyone. I was about to say something and get her another beer, when out of the corner of my eye, I noticed an angry woman heading my way. Esther, I think I'll say goodnight, I told her, pointing to my wife walking in my direction. Maybe I'll see you back here tomorrow night, if I'm still alive. I tried to laugh, but it didn't work. Don't get yourself in trouble, are you here? Like I said, I have plans for your ass. Steve, where the hell have you been and why isn't your cell phone on? I looked up at her. My wife, I think it's time we had a heart-to-heart talk, I said, and got up and walked to my house, leaving her there. She started talking at a mile a minute, trying to catch up with me. I turned to her. Will you just shut up until we get home, for God's sake? The look she gave me could have made the salt water freeze. We walked the rest of the way in silence. I had to move your car so I could park in the driveway, she said as she opened the front door. She walked to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, poured herself a glass of wine and sat down at the table. Mister, you're going to have a lot of explaining to do. I thought about grabbing another beer, but actually drank more than I should have to start this conversation with my wife. It was time to get started. Looking at her, I tried to find a way to control my voice or I would just snap. I already know who it's happening to and how long it's been going on, I just need a good reason why. And don't give me any crap about you not being satisfied at home. At those words, she realized the deed was done. A few sips of wine and the seconds flowed by while I waited for an answer. You know, you would have liked it. Not that I love you any less, but once you got involved, you would have loved it. That's not what I asked. All I want to know is why. You were one of only 2 men I ever went to bed with. And don't think for a minute that you didn't do it for me because you always did. But I got curious. You know what they say about curiosity in the cat, don't you? Steve, I'm just sorry you had to find out. I knew you were too smart to hide it forever and you'd find out eventually, but everyone said you'd come to your senses sooner or later. I knew they were wrong. So why did you keep doing it? You could have enjoyed yourself, had fun, stopped, and I never would have known. Steve, I'm about to turn 60. I've been a wife and mother since I was 20. I didn't sow wild oats. I've been a good girl, a better wife and mother. Hell, I've been hit on by most of your so-called good friends at most parties. And while the other wives were having fun, I stayed true to you, as I know you stayed true to me. I guess I got tired of being a good girl. I haven't had many men, and most of them couldn't compare to you in bed. They're not better. They're just different. I suppose you love them 2 at a time now? That made her pull back. I don't know how you know all this, but yes, I've done it with 2 men, but only once. It's not as much fun as with one guy because there's so much going on at once, but at least I experienced it. I love you as much now as I did when we first got married, and you've benefited from what I've learned over the past few months in our bedroom. As you can see, I'm no longer the shy, blushing bride I used to be. I just want to say that nothing has changed and we can carry on as before. If you want me to stop, I'll stop if that's what you want. If you want to try it yourself, well, there are quite a few women I know who wouldn't mind trying you. It doesn't have to be a deal breaker. Now I wished I'd taken that beer. My mouth was dry, my hands were sweating, and the anger I'd been trying to contain was starting to boil over. So why didn't you just leave me in our old house where I was naive and happy? Steve, I would never do that to you. I love you. Hell, I'd hate to see what you'd do if you really hated me. But in my mind, a wife shouldn't give herself to every guy who asks. Did you make Carl smile today? I know how much he was looking forward to seeing you at Judy's this afternoon. Steve, I can't help but say I still love you, and that's just me sowing some wild oats. It's not like I was going to get pregnant or anything. With all that shit, you could have already given me an STD or something worse. Sarah, those guys were sticking it in every woman who spread her legs in front of them. Can you say with absolute certainty that you haven't contracted some kind of social disease? I know I'll get checked out first thing tomorrow, and I suggest you do the same. I think what angered me the most was her cavalier attitude about the whole thing. She wasn't the least bit sorry. She would have stopped if I had wanted her to, but not otherwise. Steve, what are we going to do next? Like I said, I want to stay married and I love you. Although I still love you, Sarah. I'm pretty sure I don't want to stay married to you anymore. You have lied to me for an unknown amount of time. You have made a mockery of what was once a good marriage, and I no longer have any trust left in you. I'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight, and if you want to invite anyone over, I won't bother you. She threw me a disapproving look upon hearing that statement, but I wasn't done yet. Tomorrow won't look any better, but at least now I know where I stand with you. She tried to say something else, but I told her that I had enough lies for one night. I went to the other bedroom and tried to sleep. I listened to her crying and talking to someone on the phone until I was finally able to fall into a restless sleep. I was right. My problems didn't disappear overnight. I showered, shaved, and headed to work. I still looked like shit, and even though my boss told me to leave, I needed to be away from her for as long as possible. I found out online that I was basically out of luck. Florida was a 50-50 state, and everything was split in half. The house, our egg, both of our 401ks, everything. I wanted to cry. I definitely didn't want the house, but if she bought me out, she'd take most of our savings. Since I made more money than her, I would have to pay her alimony, and since my 401k was so much larger than hers, she would get 50% of mine. No matter how I looked at it, I was totally screwed. For the second night in a row, I went straight to the town square. At least tonight I knew Sarah wouldn't worry and look for me, at least not until later in the evening. Well, don't keep me in the bloody dark. What the hell happened last night? And don't leave out any of the savory details? I held out Esther's bud and told her how it all went down, blow by blow. I checked it out online and I'm about to get destroyed in the divorce on top of that. I looked up as a tall woman walked over and handed Esther a beer. It wasn't Lucy this time. Steve, this is my daughter Catherine. She lives up north and will be spending the next 2 weeks with me. She doesn't drink beer and likes to dance, but don't hold it against her. So, you're the infamous Steve Moore I've heard so much about. From what my mom told me, I expected you to be an 8-foot-tall Robert Redford who can walk on water. I looked at Esther. To tell you the truth, I just told her you weren't an asshole like most guys. We all laughed. I take it you're going to be staying with us for a couple weeks? I looked at Esther again. Is there anything you haven't told her about me yet? Let me think about it. No. What can I do if you're the only guy who cheers me up and cares about me? Has she always been like this? I asked her daughter. She laughed. It's still nothing compared to how she used to be. At least she doesn't smoke pot anymore. I handed Catherine my chair and went to find another. See, dearie, I told you he was cute and a real catch. Mom, when are you going to stop playing matchmaker? When you get a decent man, or I retire, whichever comes first. Well, ladies, and I use that term in your case, looking at Esther, what's on your agenda for this evening? Esther immediately replied, I plan to listen to music and get drunk. I thought it would be a nice gesture if you would show my daughter around the neighborhood. She hasn't been here in years. Also, maybe you could talk her into eating something. The girl is skin and bones and she could use some meat. Catherine and I looked at each other. Looks like I got my orders. Steve, you don't have to, Catherine started to say until I stopped her. I'd love to. I haven't eaten anything today anyway. I showed her the stores near the plaza and gave her a tour of the nickel. The music playing in the background was a nice touch. Sorry to hear about your wife. Did she cheat on you for long? I looked at her. Did your mom leave out any details of my life? Not really. She even pointed out a few guys your wife had fun with. I wasn't sure how I felt at that moment, so I just shook my head. Name your poison. This place has every dish known to man. We settled on Italian. We got to talking, or should I say I got to talking. I told her about details her mom hadn't mentioned. I told her I was still working and would probably be working for a while longer. Has your mom always been this wild? Steve, she's relatively calm now. I thought she and my dad would divorce a million times before he died. The best way I can describe my mom is this. She was a free spirit. She smoked, she drank, she partied, but she was loyal to my father all her life. Looking at her, you'd think she was a drifter, but that's what she wanted people to think. Those who kept in touch with her became her close friends. On the other hand, Those who looked down on her, she tried to shame. She likes you, my friend. Sem. With a mother like that, you must have been a wild child. Are you joking? She was the strictest mother in the world. I had the earliest curfew of any of my friends, and she had to date and flirt with every guy I went out with. If any of them even just cast a glance at her, he was done. You see, my mom was beautiful by any standard. My mom's handprint was on the faces of my dad's friends more than once. Like I said, she acted loose, but she never was. When my dad sold his business and moved here, I was more than concerned, but after my mom took over, I knew everything was going to be okay. Steve, my mom was and still is a strong woman with her own opinions. If she likes you, then she likes you. And if she doesn't, God help you. The food was delicious, the conversation enjoyable, and the time flew by. 2 hours later, we came back looking for her mom. She was still where we left her, with a beer in her hand. So, did you have a nice chat about me? I suppose now you're trying to figure out how to put me in a nursing home for my own good, right? Are you kidding? We've been looking for the right guy so you can finally get laid and stop being such a sorry ass to everyone, I teased her, grinning widely. See, I told you he's a head above the rest, always looking out for others and not himself. So, Steve, when are you moving in? Esther, I don't want to impose, especially since your daughter is living with you now. How many damn times do I have to tell you? I have a room, and it's not an imposition. And who am I going to drink with? Those two are lightweights at best. Besides, do you want to spend the night with that whore of yours? Mom. Hey girl, I'm just telling the truth and he knows it. But if he wants to live with a tramp, that's his business. Some guys enjoy sharing their wives and letting them humiliate themselves. I'd never put up with that, but to each his own. Steve, I'm sorry. Mom must have had too much beer and that's what came out of her mouth. No, it's okay. She's only saying what's been on my mind for the last week or so. Why don't I grab a few things and meet you at your place? I need a good night's sleep and I won't get that at my house, that's for sure. I told them I would probably see them in an hour and headed towards the house. I knew Sarah would want to talk again, but right now I needed to be with her to figure out what I was going to do. Where have you been? I was worried about you. Sarah pounced on me as soon as I walked through the door. Just been in the town square making some preparations, I answered her. What kind of preparations? If you want to know where I plan on spending the next few nights? Why can't you just stay here? We can talk and work things out. You still don't get it, do you? I don't like to share, never have, and never will. Do you really think I can just overlook what you've done? And how the hell can I face our supposed friends knowing you've probably slept with 3/4 of their husbands, not to mention how many other guys? I need time away from you to think about what I want to do. Doesn't it matter to you that I still love you? Sarah, people who love each other don't have fun with others behind their husband's back. I think you have a very distorted idea of what love is. Steve, I'm going to stop. I won't do it anymore. But for how long? Until I feel comfortable with you again or until there's a new guy you haven't tried out yet? You've killed all my trust in you. She just stared at me, not knowing what to say. You know what the most surprising thing was? I was pissed at her and mad as hell. But more pissed about losing what I had accumulated over the last 30+ years than I was about losing my wife. What kind of sick and uncaring bastard had made me? I half expected to want to kick all of their asses, and I could easily have done that or enjoyed kicking Sarah's ass, but I guess I looked at her like she just wasn't worth the trouble. However, losing my house and my savings was a whole other matter. I guess I was just stalling to figure out my next move. I'm leaving here for a couple days. I just need to get away before I do something I might regret. Also, keep your buddies out of my damn house unless you want to see them pulling daisies apart. And for goodness sake, don't call me, not you or any of my supposed friends. You are the last people in the world I want to talk to right now. I hope the kids don't call and I don't have to explain to them what a round-heeled slut their mother has become. I finished packing my suitcase. When are you coming back? I think the question should be if, not when, don't you? Loading my suitcase into the car, I hit the road. Luckily, I had a GPS in the car, because there were so many subdivisions and little nooks and crannies in this complex that, without it, I probably never would have found Esther's house. Even with the GPS, it took me over half an hour. Most of the beautiful settlements were gated, with a guard at the entrance, and Esther's house was no exception. I told the guard my name, and before I could even tell him who I was visiting, he opened the gate. She must have informed him of my arrival. 3 left turns, 1 right, and at the end of the cul-de-sac, I found her house. It was more than twice the size of mine and looked much richer. I grabbed my bag and rang the bell. Lucy smiled and let me in. 2 seconds later, I was greeted by Catherine and Esther. Once inside, I was given a tour of the house. It was shaped like a horseshoe with a hook on one end. The living rooms, kitchen, and dining room were at the front of the house as you entered through the foyer. Esther and Lucy's bedrooms were in the left wing, and the right wing was almost completely enveloped by the crystal-clear pool. It was an odd layout, sure, but it gave the impression that the right wing had been invented later or attached to the house. Esther showed me my room on the right side of the horseshoe. I especially liked that this location would give me privacy and access to the pool. Esther explained that Catherine had a room next to the pool on the other side of the house. Mine, on the other hand, was directly across from her pool at the end of the right side of the house. Steve, don't expect me to wait on you hand and foot. Now you know where the kitchen is, and since you'll probably be gone before I get up in the morning, Lucy will put the coffee pot on so you can have a cup before you leave if you want. There are always bagels and stuff in the fridge for you to eat. If you want something special, give Lucy a list. We eat dinner at 6 every night, but if you're dining out, be sure to warn Lucy so she doesn't cook something for you. That's all the rules. Make all the noise you want, because by 10 o'clock I'll be dead to the world anyway. If I die in the night, just make sure that bitch Lucy doesn't blindly steal me before they put me in the ground. This was said in complete seriousness to Lucy, who rolled her eyes at what she heard. Knowing Esther, Lucy was probably used to it. We talked for a few minutes. Esther wanted to know every detail of what was going on between Sarah and me. She was definitely a nosy old broad. Catherine just sat there, sipping wine from her glass. Apparently, she was used to having these conversations with her mother. "Time for bed," Lucy said to Esther as she walked over to her wheelchair. "How many times have I told you not to sneak up on me, woman? Damn, are you trying to give me a heart attack?" "No, ma'am, just trying to get you into bed, that's all." "Remember what I told Steve? If I'm dead in the morning, the maid did it." Lucy directed her back to the room. "Welcome to the madness," Catherine said with a half-smile. "Can you imagine what I've had to put up with all my life? Now it's like water rolling off a duck's back. 90% of what she says or does is for effect or to cheer up people who don't know her as well as Lucy or me. You're the center of her universe now, so you're going to get it." "I don't mind. I've gotten a thick enough skin over the years that nothing can hurt me." "Not even your wife?" I glared at her. "Sorry, that was a little rude of me. I guess I've been around my mother too long." "Don't worry, I've gotten over it. I think she thought our life was too boring and she needed to spice it up a bit. What bothers me the most is that she's not even sorry. She seems sorry for getting caught, but not for what she did." "Sounds like my ex. Maybe the two of them should get together. He basically blamed me for all his affairs. I guess I wasn't a big enough whore for him and didn't do all the crazy things he suggested. My only regret is that I let her plan most of our vacations. I always wanted to go on a cruise, but we never did. She hated the thought of being stuck on a ship, no matter how big it was. So we flew here and there, and while it was fun, I would have loved to just sit back and do nothing for 7 days. Let someone else cook and serve me for a change," I told her, letting my thoughts wander. "You would have loved the cruise. My only problem with them was that my ex was going there to hammer away at anyone who bought into his stupid phrases. Why I stayed with him for so long, I'll never know. My mom must have told me about 20 times to leave him. When she hired a private investigator and got proof of 3 ongoing affairs, I finally got rid of him. And like I said, the reason he said he was cheating was because I was a cold fish in bed. How do you warm up to a man who just dumped his last girlfriend and wants to grab another bite before bed?" I was hot, tired, and had to unpack. I apologized and said Friday morning would come too early and I'd better go to bed. I hung up all my clothes, brushed my teeth, and flossed. I was about to take a shower when I suddenly remembered the pool outside the door. What the hell? Turning off the light, wearing only the skin on my back, I snuck outside and slipped into the pool. It was cool and so refreshing. I floated on my back, swam a lap or two, and was already holding onto the sides when I looked toward Catherine's room. As far as I could tell, she was about 55, though she looked younger. Her dark brown hair was cut and styled short, so it was probably easy to care for. I think she had a pretty good body, but a little thick in the hips. I wasn't sure, but it seemed to me that she had more meat on her bones than Sarah. They both had similar blue-gray eyes, but Catherine had much fuller lips, the kind of plump lips made especially for kissing. I wondered if she'd had Botox injections. I took another lap and climbed out of the pool. It was refreshing. Afterward, I was going to get a good night's sleep, which I did. Everyone except Lucy was already asleep when I left around 6:30 the next morning. There was a note on the counter with a key to the house and a latch key to the gate. I picked up the note and read, "I suppose you'll need them." I waved to the guard on my way out and spent the next 8.5 hours doing as little as possible to get through the day. I thought about taking Sarah off the medical registry and removing her from the list of beneficiaries of my 401k and company life insurance policy. Maybe next week, I thought, as I headed to my new abode. Even though I told her not to, Sarah still left me a voicemail letting me know she missed me and still loved me. I deleted it. I opened the gate, drove up to Esther's house, parked, and opened the front door. As I stepped inside, I could smell the delicious odor of food cooking. Unlike those nights when there was a note on the microwave telling me where my dinner was, this was going to be a real home-cooked meal. Baked chicken breast, baked potatoes, whole green beans, and a green salad rounded out dinner. The dessert of the evening was cold, whip-cold watermelon, and strong, rich coffee. Around 6:30, Esther announced that we were all going to the town square. "You two take the other golf cart," Esther told Catherine and me. Lucy carried Esther and her wheelchair into the garage and loaded them both into another cart. It struck me that Lucy did this alone almost every night. After 5 minutes of Esther's whining and scolding, the two of them set off, and Catherine and I followed. "Are you dancing, Steve?" she asked me on the way. "Yes, but not very well. I like having a beautiful woman in my arms, and I can do a few slow dances, but I'm not up to country music." She laughed. "So you don't even know how to dance the grapevine?" When I gave her a look that said she didn't even ask, she said, "Okay, I'll leave that subject." See, now Esther had already half finished her first beer when we found a parking spot. She saved 2 chairs for us next to her. Can you believe it? Some old dumbass wanted to steal those chairs, even when I told him I was saving them for you. He told me I wasn't allowed to save the chairs. I told him I'd kick his ass if he laid a finger on them. He left, but he wasn't happy. "I see your wife is here with all her friends," she said, pointing to the square. "If I didn't know any better, I'd swear she's trying to rub your nose in what she's doing." I didn't think she was right, but nothing could surprise me now. As the slow song started up, I held out my hand and asked a surprised Catherine to dance. She looked at me, then at Esther, and then stood up. We stayed on our side of the square, and I tried my best not to step on her heels. I didn't have to worry about her because I knew from the first step she took that she wasn't a beginner. For a few minutes, I thought she was even in the lead as we moved flawlessly across the square. Had I asked Catherine to dance because Sarah was here? Yes and no. Yes, because she was here, and no, because I wanted to see how Catherine would feel in my arms. It had been forever since I had hugged or danced with another woman other than Sarah. When the song ended, we went back to our chairs. "You guys looked good together," stated Esther as we walked back to her chair. "Steve, I thought you said you had 2 left feet. You're not a bad dancer for an old man." Catherine giggled, but I couldn't get angry because that's exactly what I told her. Catherine and I must have danced for another half a day. I even tried to dance closer and closer to Sarah's group. Sarah, on the other hand, danced almost every dance. "Steve, I don't like being used. It makes me feel cheap and dirty. So, if you really don't want to dance with me, rather than make your wife jealous, I'd rather you didn't ask me out again." I guess I was trying to show her that I'm not completely devastated, but I do enjoy dancing with you, believe it or not. You're not as scrawny as my wife. I regretted saying that as soon as it came out of my mouth. Not as well fed? Are you saying I'm fat? Not at all, it's just that I don't have to worry about holding you tight. With Sarah, I was always afraid I'd break a couple of ribs if I squeezed her hard. You need to work hard on how to give a girl a compliment. It's based on honest meaning. You just don't pitch it well. She was right. Now let's try it again. She repeated. Why do you want to dance with me? Because you're such a wonderful dancer and so light on your feet. Good recovery. You can still do well, she said, laughing. When we looked back, we saw Esther waving at Lucy, inviting her for another round. Shortly before 9 o'clock, we all went home. Sarah had watched me dance with Catherine more than once, and at one point I thought she was going to come over and talk to me. God, I'm so glad she didn't. Back at the house, Esther said goodnight to me before Lucy put her to bed. Lucy asked me if I could look at a few things in the house that needed repair. I told her that I would have all day Saturday and would be happy to fix anything that needed fixing. Catherine and I talked until almost midnight. She told me about her early days with Mom and Dad, which must have been both comical and crazy at the same time. We parted ways and I went back to my room. For the second night in a row, I stripped off my clothes and plunged into the cool, dark water. Nothing like being in the water on a hot night to lower your body temperature. When the lights went out at Catherine's, I didn't pay much attention until I noticed the curtains were still open. Luckily, it was dark, or she probably would have seen me in the pool in full uniform. I swam a few laps, but mostly swam on my back. 20 minutes later, I was out and on my way back to my room. My wife said I wasn't ashamed, but no one could see in the backyard and it was dark in here. Besides, the only rooms facing the pool were Catherine's and mine. On Saturday, I did a million things, from fixing jammed doors to leveling cabinets to pulling tons of hair out of the sink and bathtub drains. Several sprinkler heads had to be replaced and a leak under the kitchen sink had to be fixed. By 3 o'clock, I had finished what I could and was sitting by the pool with the crown in my hand. I knew I kept you around for a reason, Esther said, rolling up to me. I figured if you had your own house, you'd know how to fix some of the things around here, and as always, I turned out to be right. Hasn't anyone done anything around here in the last 10 years? I had a repairman for a while, but he fooled me every month saying he repaired this and that, but never did shit. After I let him go, I only brought someone in when something broke. So, well, tomorrow I'm going to Home Depot to pick up a few things and fix the rest of the items. She smiled for a second and then took on a serious expression. Steve, I have access to a good attorney, and he's at your disposal. I've told him about your situation, and he'll do the paperwork for free. However, he did make one suggestion that you may or may not like. He told me that if you are afraid of losing half of what you own, then just do nothing. Nothing? Replied I. That's right, nothing. She can live her life and you can live yours. Strip her of everything you can, take half the money from your checking and savings account, and live separately. If there is no divorce, you will still own half of the house and can tell her what goes on in it, even if you don't live there. And if something happens suddenly, you will have time to hide what you earn now. It's not ideal, and she won't get what she wants. That is, unless you want to go back to her. You don't want to, do you? Not a chance in hell, but I'll have to get a few things I want to keep. Steve, it's still your house. The lawyer told me you can come and go as you please. I liked that idea. You could stay here and instead of rent, you'd just have to maintain the place. What do you say? You know Sarah's going to start pressuring me to come home or at least make a decision about us. I can't stall with her forever. People live apart for years before getting divorced. That way, unless you are cohabiting, the money you make belongs to you and you can do what you want with it. Let her live on her damn pension and see how she likes it. That sounded better and better. We didn't square off, but toasted to our new arrangement. Saturday night, I begged not to go to the square. I was a little tired and didn't want to run into Sarah. Why don't you and Catherine have dinner? I'll even buy you a treat for what you did tonight. I thought we agreed on free rent. The agreement starts on Monday. Take it to Anthony's and have them put it on my account. You have an account? Hell, after 27 years here, most places give me preferential seating and service. I guess I must be something of an old star around here. I'll pay for dinner and I have another restaurant in mind. Suit yourself, moneybags, Esther muttered as she walked away. El Ranchero was small and quiet, with the best Tex-Mex food in all of Florida. With a cold bottle of sangria and good company, I forgot all my troubles for the night. We didn't talk about my past or hers, just what was going on at the moment. You're a really nice guy, you know that? When Mom first started telling me about you, I thought you were just trying to take advantage of her. Steve, she can be feisty, but sometimes she's too trusting. I can't imagine anyone taking advantage of her, especially with Lucy around. Believe it or not, after my father died, two guys tried to gain her favor and marry her. One took the hint, and the other had to be gently persuaded to leave my mom alone. Let's just say he's living somewhere up north right now because of possible health issues. She laughed and I got a little worried. Don't worry, I know you're harmless, but I checked you out after she mentioned your name a second time. Where do you think my mom gets all the dirt about everyone around her? She has a private investigator on her staff. Let's just say my mom likes to know what's going on and it keeps her out of trouble. I looked at Catherine in a whole new light. So, what else do you know about me? Everything that matters. First of all, you're a caring person who can be trusted unconditionally, and that's hard to find these days. It's like everyone takes care of themselves first and foremost, and to hell with everyone else. You, on the other hand, truly care about others. Does your report say which side of the bed I like to sleep on? I replied, feeling somewhat annoyed. I guess I didn't like the thought of someone checking up on me behind my back. It seems so sneaky. Steve, I had to make sure, and no, the report didn't have those details, but since you're right-handed, I would assume you sleep on the right side of the bed. In this, she proved to be right. After dinner, we did some shopping and headed back to her mom's house. At one point, we touched each other with our hands, but I recoiled when I realized what I was doing. You see, Sarah and I had always walked hand in hand. It wasn't planned. It was like our hands just knew what to do. I missed that closeness now. Over the next week, Catherine and I got to know each other much better. Sarah kept her distance, for which I was grateful. I soon realized that I was beginning to enjoy my newfound freedom. Esther's lawyer drew up the divorce papers and was just keeping them on file so that, when I was ready, everything would be ready. We took Esther to the square most of the evening. I danced with Catherine because I wanted to, not because I wanted to piss Sarah off even more. In my eyes, it was over between Sarah and me. Just the thought of being with her gave me an empty feeling in my stomach. When I asked Catherine how long she had been divorced and if she was currently dating anyone, she threw me a curious look but didn't answer either question. We walked around the stores and at some point our hands made contact, and this time they stayed joined. On the way back, we were both pretty quiet. Lucy was watching TV, which meant that Esther no longer counted. We looked at each other and we both wanted to say or do something, but neither of us knew exactly how. Legally, I was still married, but all the feelings I had for Sarah were gone after that phone conversation I had overheard. When I thought of her now, all I could see was her having intercourse on the bed with some white-haired guy. I was sad that everything we had was gone now. The TV was on, and I couldn't sleep. When I looked out the window, I saw Catherine's light was out. I think if it had been on, I probably would have gone over to talk to her some more. I guess I must have felt lonely. After 36 years, I was alone and didn't know what to do. Turning off the lights, I slipped out into the pool. It was still warm outside and the humidity must have been over 90%. I just walked back and forth in the water, cooling my body. "Is the water still warm?" she asked, looking down at me. My brain was processing as fast as it could. That's great. I'd already forgotten what it was like to swim on a hot night like tonight. Well, later, we got down to it. After a few dozen minutes of fun, I tried to get ahead of Catherine and headed for the kitchen, figuring it wouldn't be too cool if we went in there at the same time. "Did you sleep better last night?" asked Esther. "Much better, thank you," I replied, walking over to the counter to grab a cup of coffee and a cheesy Danish pie. Lucy smiled at me and asked if she could make me breakfast. "That will suffice, but thank you for asking." Catherine came in about 20 minutes later. She said hello to everyone and stopped when her eyes met mine. With a cup of coffee in her hand, she walked over and kissed Mom on the top of her head. "So, Mom, what new and exciting things have you planned for me today?" she said with a look of utter satisfaction on her face. That evening, we had a barbecue. I grilled steaks, shrimp, mushrooms, and onions. It took me almost an hour to scrub and degrease the damn thing to the point where it would work properly. Afterward, I was told it hadn't been used in over 5 years. I jokingly asked what else hadn't been used in over 5 years that I could take care of. After Esther said she would meet me in my room later, we moved on to the next topic. I spent almost 6 hours between Home Depot and the house changing air conditioner filters, pouring Freon into her car's air conditioner, and recalibrating the sprinkler timer. I made a checklist of things to do and told Lucy to let me know when she saw something that needed attention. That evening, we all went to the town square, and as always, Sarah was there. This time, however, she came over and asked to speak to me alone. "When are you coming home?" That was the first question out of her mouth, followed by, "Are you going to divorce me over this?" "Sarah, I'm not doing anything right now. I don't know where you and I will end up, but right now I don't want to be around you. I feel like a pawn that's been manipulated into doing something I didn't really want to do. And with your flippant attitude about sowing oats, I'm not sure we'll ever be husband and wife in the old sense of the word again." "Well, for how long? A week? A month? 5 months? I need some idea." "In other words, you need to know when I'm coming home so you can get the guys you're having fun with out of the house before I get there? God knows I'd divorce you in a heartbeat if I knew you were having fun with anyone in my house. Our house, Steve, is our house. So you want to have your parties on your half of the house? I'm not going to have parties in our house, never have and never will. I just need some idea of what you're looking at and whether you're going to stay with that old lady forever." This old lady, as you call her, was the one who told me about your adventures and who you were doing it with. She told me about your dance buddies, and when I told her that you wouldn't cheat on me for anything in the world, she just told me to watch my back. And when your friends couldn't look me in the eye anymore, I had to put two and two together. So this old lady, I suppose, turned out to be more observant than your own husband. Things weren't going the way she'd planned. I just want to know we have a chance. "There's always a chance," I replied. "She wants you to come back?" asked Esther as I returned to my small group. "So she just asked if we still have a chance, that's all." "Did she give you a time frame?" "No, I only told her that I wasn't going to divorce her right now and that I needed time." "I told you he wasn't stupid," Esther said to Lucy. "She thought you'd go back to the tramp, but I was betting on you." Catherine's eyes and mine began the visual foreplay. "Catherine, do you want to dance?" I asked, holding out my hand to her. "Let's show my wife what a good dancer I've become." Of course, I was still a shitty dancer except for the slow songs, but I tried anyway. I saw Lucy and Esther laughing when I stepped on Catherine's foot. She was happy when I decided to end the evening. Was I expecting a repeat of the previous evening's encore? I didn't expect one. Rather, I hoped for one. Looking at the clock, I waited for Lucy to tuck Catherine's mom in and was about to turn off the light when I heard a knock on the door. I turned off the light and opened the door. Catherine burst into the room. "I'm not going to sleep tonight," were the last words I heard out of her mouth for the next 2 hours. This is how most nights with Catherine went until I realized we only had 2 nights left. Lucy would throw one glance at us here and there, but Esther didn't seem to notice what was going on between us. On our last night, we begged to go to the town square. We ordered pizza, opened a bottle of wine, and ate by the pool. Hot cheese can be deadly if you're not careful or just playing around, as I soon learned from experience. "I don't want you to go," I said to Catherine, putting my arm around her. "There's no choice. I have a job up north that's looking forward to me, and a boss who won't be happy if I call and say my new lover has tied me up and refuses to let me go. It won't be very pleasant." "When can we see each other again?" "Well, you can fly in any weekend because I won't be back until Thanksgiving. We can talk on the phone, and my computer has video, so we can talk on it while watching each other." "That could be interesting." "You really are a dirty old man, aren't you?" "You have no idea to what extent," I said. At least until the rest of the clan was asleep in their beds. At 8 o'clock, we got up, ate breakfast, and started making plans to take her to the airport. "Steve, would you be a dear and take Catherine to the airport? Cabs cost a fortune and they are so unreliable," Esther asked while Lucy made us breakfast. "No problem. I don't have anything for today and I'll be happy to drive you." "Good. I'm glad that's settled. You know your wife was looking for you last night?" "I told her you had a damn date. That shut the bitch up when she started whining at me." "Esther, we shouldn't make waves." "Steve, I couldn't help myself. I've been watching her flirt with one guy and another all night, and I needed to knock her down a peg. Hell, you're not going back to her. You're not, are you?" I shook my head without looking at Catherine. "That's what I thought. Let that bitch know you're already retired and have a new life." I knew she was right, but that was the last thing on my mind right now. I packed up my car while Catherine said goodbye to my mom and Lucy. I watched as she handed the envelope to Lucy and then gave her a big hug and kissed her goodbye. The drive was quiet and I was barely over the speed limit, hearing trucks honking and cutting me off. You're going to get us killed. You know that, don't you? I'm just being cautious, that's all. No. Bullshit, you're delaying what we both knew would happen eventually. Now step on it, because if I miss my flight, I'll be stuck on the red eye, and I won't tolerate that. Since Septa 11, you can't even get into the gate area without a ticket, so we said goodbye at the gate outside. I'm going to miss you like hell, I said, and kissed her as often as time allowed. Just better not hear about you hitting on some old lady or showing anyone your new moves on the dance floor. Mom and Lucy will keep me in the loop about you. I grabbed her again, pulled her to me, and kissed her one last time, knowing it had to last a while. She looked me in the eyes, gave me another kiss, and waved me off and walked out of the terminal. The drive home was quiet, boring, and agonizing. September and October had been stressful. Sarah and I talked now and then. She was looking for some kind of closure, one way or another. I put it off as long as I could. By the first week of November, I had stopped playing games. I'm not going back, I told her over dinner. Too much has happened, and while I'm still disappointed in you, I'm finally over it. Steve, I never did it to hurt you, but I guess I was just kidding myself about that. I sincerely hoped you'd join me, but the truth is I always knew it wasn't going to happen. We had a good run, didn't we? Of course we did. I'm just sorry it's over. Now she was crying. Are you sure you don't want to try again? I can promise I'll be faithful to you. Like I said, too much has happened. When we dated someone, I always asked if you slept with them, and don't even get me started on your relationship with Connie and Judy. Too much trouble and not enough trust. That night we ended it for good. She wanted the house and we agreed that she would buy it back from me. Nothing was said about spousal support, our 401ks, or anything else. I told her that I would keep her on a medical plan for the rest of the year, and that I only wanted to take a few things out of the house. The idea of leaving her everything else was my main trump card. I think I came out of the situation fragrant as a rose, and most importantly, we parted, if not enemies, certainly not friends. After 40, or should I say 38 good years and 2 children, there was no point in trying to kill each other. Nevertheless, I was still somewhat depressed. It was as if something inside me had died that day. Esther and Lucy gave me a wide berth for about 2 weeks, and then informed me that it was not my place to mope. Catherine was still my only comfort. We talked, emailed, or computer chatted almost every day. Her job was crazy and mine kept me busy, but I was counting the time until I left there. There was something missing in my life. I had been we for over 30+ years, and being me was only getting harder. Chapter 3. A New Beginning. Everyone in the house was anxiously awaiting Catherine's return, and I was getting uneasy as the days stretched on. On Wednesday, I left work early and drove to my new, or should I say Esther's, house. I parked in the driveway, figuring I'd be picking Catherine up at the airport tonight. I walked in the front door and there she was talking to her mom and Lucy. I think I froze in place and just stared at her. I wanted to rush over to her, grab her in my arms and catch up on the 3 months we'd been apart. "Hi, Steve," she said, smiling her beautiful smile. In that moment, I realized that I loved her and wanted her more than anything in the world. We had never once exchanged the L word, but deep down I knew she felt the same way. "For Christ's sake, give her a kiss before you pout in your goddamn pants." "I may be old, but I'm not stupid, you know," Esther said with a smile. Lucy told her to shut up. Last time they couldn't get away from each other after the first week. At least this time we won't have to worry about taking up 2 rooms. Although I still couldn't move, Catherine could do it. We kissed for about 2 minutes before coming up for air. "I'd say you two should get a room if I wasn't so damn hungry and dinner wasn't ready yet. So give her another kiss and we'll meet you in the dining room." Esther told Lucy to get her ass in gear and get them out of there. "God, I missed you," I said. "Snip, come on, we better get over there before Mom freaks out. We have the next 4 nights to get reacquainted." We walked into the dining room hand in hand. "Calm down, or I'll have Lucy hose you down. You're starting to act the way I acted with your father, and that's one memory I want to keep to myself." Esther smiled and I realized I had her blessing, or at least I hoped so. We spent more time in my bedroom than anywhere else. In the town square, I danced most of the songs with her. I just didn't want to let her out of my arms. And yes, I was still a shitty dancer, but I was improving. The first night in bed, I told her I was hopelessly in love with her. When she didn't reciprocate, I got a little worried, but hell, I'd always been the aggressor. When I reached out to touch her the next morning, she was already up, dressed, and having breakfast with her mom when I arrived. Did you sleep well? Esther glared at me, probably expecting me to blush or something. I would have, but your daughter kept me up most of the night. Catherine nearly coughed up the last sip of coffee. I guess she is like her mother after all. Dinner that night was amazing. I deep-fried the turkey, and Lucy, as usual, worked wonders in the kitchen while Catherine and her mother went to visit. I ate too much. Hell, we all ate too much and had to put off dessert until 8 o'clock. The Dutch apple pie with cinnamon ice cream and the cool French mulberry tart only added pounds to my waistline. We had leftovers for the next 2 days. Never cook a 22-pound turkey for 4 people. Friday night, after the wonderful lovemaking with Catherine, she wanted to talk. And I mean talk for real. Steve, where are we going with this? I mean, what are your intentions? I think I've made my feelings clear. I love you. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I don't think I could explain it any clearer, do you? You live and work in Florida, and I live and work in New Jersey. The earliest I will retire is at 62, which is 7 years from now, and you have a little over 4 years left. That's a long time to be apart. I know it won't be easy, but it will be worth it in the end. Catherine, I love you. Steve, love is beautiful but fleeting. After a year or two, the attraction fades, and seeing each other only occasionally, I wonder if we can survive. And where will we live? Do you plan to live with my mom forever? She was asking tough questions. Look, I have money in the bank, a pretty decent 401k, and with Social Security, I can't say we'll be on easy street, but we'll have more than enough to live well. Do you want to live in retirement in New Jersey? Hell no, not on my life. I'm tired of the harsh winters and I want to relax and enjoy the warm weather and the cool sand between my toes. I'm just a little worried. Sarah is gone and so is my house. We can buy another one here or a condo on the beach. I just want to spend my life with you. We don't have to decide right now, just give us a chance. She smiled and kissed me again. Did she pull away? She looked concerned about where we were going. I was concerned, but I knew what I wanted, and that was her. The rest of the weekend was a little tense. We were still close, but had some tough discussions on more than one occasion. Our ride to the airport was even more relaxed than the previous one, if that was even possible. Our eyes met often, and we never stopped holding hands, but I felt a little discord. I unloaded her suitcases from the trunk, tipped the porter, and enclosed her in my arms again. Catherine, I love you with my heart and soul. I know it was a little fast and perhaps a little excessive, but deep down I know it's the right thing to do. Please think about it. I don't require any firm commitment from you, just think about it. About us. She looked up at me and smiled. Kissing me sweetly to warm me up, at least until the next phone call, she walked out of the terminal. I felt a chill run down my spine, the way you get when you say someone just walked over your grave. For the first time in years, I was scared of losing something I'd grown attached to. Esther gave me a concerned look when I got home. And then it hit me. It wasn't home. This was Esther's home, and I was nothing more than a guest. A welcome guest, but a guest nonetheless. In an unusually warm and caring voice, Esther said to me, "You read too much into what my daughter says. I've known her much longer than you have, and she's just a little scared, that's all." I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't as sure as she was. Catherine was due back for vacation, and I already had at least some sort of plan in my head. The change was slow, and I didn't fully realize it until Lucy had a family crisis and had to leave for 2 or 3 days. Lucy, take care of what you need. I can handle everything around the house. You have no idea what you're getting into. Maybe I should take a temporary job until I get back. And there's no time. Mind your own business and don't worry about me. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about Esther. Go on, we'll be fine. It was an absolute fact that Lucy earned every penny Esther paid her. Esther was hell on wheels, so to speak, or maybe just a demanding whore. The food wasn't as good as Lucy's. I was counting the hours until Lucy returned. After dinner the next night, we went to hear music in the town square. The music was 50s style and aimed at a generation older than mine. Esther was sipping a beer, talking to another woman next to her, when Sarah appeared out of nowhere. "Steve, what's up?" she asked with some hesitation, not knowing how she would be received. "I'm doing pretty damn well, don't you see?" The sudden burst of anger surprised me as much as it did her. "Why the hell do you even care? Don't you get enough tail from all your friends? Or are you just trolling for more weird stuff? Why don't you go back to your friends and get one of them on me?" I was practically yelling at her. I didn't even care that everyone was eavesdropping on our conversation, which was already rapidly rolling downhill. I don't think I'll ever forget the look on her face. Her eyes were full of tears, drops were dripping from her nose, and the rest of her face was covered with an expression of horror as she covered her mouth with her hands. Sarah couldn't say anything. I just kept pushing my words into her. "Please, just back off." She ran back across the plaza crying, losing one shoe in the process. Now everyone was looking at me, including Esther. "What?" shouted I to those who were still looking at me. "What would you say to your ex-wife who, after 35 years, started branching out and having fun with everyone?" People looked away embarrassed. "Well, that's the most excitement I've seen here in the last year," Esther said, looking at me. "I think it's time for us to leave this place. You've made a few people think." For the next 3 days, Esther drank only one beer a night. She was still alert, but somewhat subdued. "Are you feeling all right, Esther? You seem kind of down." "Just a little tired. How are you and my daughter doing?" she asked. "Not as well as I'd like, but I think I understand a little of what she's getting at." "Listen to me. She may be a real pig-headed bitch, but you won't find a more caring and honest woman. And that's not counting the fact that she's my daughter and not just any old lady." Her wide smile was reminiscent of the old Esther. Thank God Lucy was finally back. A day late, but back. "How did it go?" was the first question out of her mouth. "Good. I wonder, and how the hell do you do that?" The question sort of came out of my mouth on its own. Day in and day out. Lucy was definitely a better cook than I was. Her dinner the first night back made me think of my mom's roast beef, but it was better. I didn't go out to listen to music that night. 2 nights ago, I'd made a fool of myself and decided to lay low for a few days. Apparently, my issues with Catherine had taken over, and I took it out on Sarah. Not that she didn't deserve it. "You sure made a mess out there," Lucy said as she walked through the door and pushed Esther's wheelchair in. "Everybody, and I mean everybody, is talking about it. The vote is about 65% in your favor, and it would be more if you weren't so cruel. Most people seem to think the same as you do, but they're too prim, or were until yesterday, to say anything, but not now. Steve, what Lucy is saying is that you're doing a good job. The fact that you left your cheating wife has made you somewhat of a local hero. I don't think some of the spouses who were on the fence before are there now. I think there will be more husbands and wives in trouble before your little rant is forgotten. Well, I hope it took you off balance because I was beginning to miss old Steve." The week ended on a high note, at least for Esther. I loved Christmas, and my kids were upset that I wasn't going to Jacksonville to be with them. Sarah was going, and I'm sure they wanted it to be like old times, but it wasn't to be. Of course they weren't on her side, but my daughter asked why I couldn't forgive her mother after almost 40 years together. When I asked her what she would do if her husband cheated on her, it silenced her. I bought gifts for everyone and shipped them via UPS well in advance so I could put them under the tree in time. It was my first Christmas alone, and I was more than discouraged. Even though Esther and Lucy now seemed almost like family, I missed my own children. "Steve, can you pick Catherine up at the airport on Wednesday? Transportation will be a problem at best, and you'll only be here moping anyway," Esther said, starting to trim the artificial Christmas tree. "And if you want anything special to eat, let Lucy know. I like ham and goose for Christmas dinner, but I'm up for almost anything else." I added yams and crescent rolls to the long list of food and decided that Lucy would be in the kitchen most of the day and I would be left to entertain Esther and Catherine. Kissing Catherine lifted my spirits, but it still wasn't the same. We held hands, talked, and all the way home she teased me unabashedly. I helped her set up her things in her room and was already mixing celebratory drinks when she returned, having changed into her winter clothes. It's so nice to be in shorts again. We've probably got a foot of snow up north, and the weather is supposed to drop to 30 degrees by the end of the week. If that's the case, I'll probably stay here another week, she said, looking at me. I handed out the drinks and proposed a toast. To new friends and new life, I said, as I touched both glasses and took the first sip of eggnog. Why don't you go visit your mom? Because I told Lucy I'd help her with dinner tonight. Okay, Lucy, how long has she been sick and what the hell is wrong with her? There was concern and surprise in her gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. You know Esther. Some days she's on the upswing and other days she's on the decline. Maybe you can say things like that to someone, but I've known her too long for it to be true. When she drinks one beer all night and looks lethargic by 8 o'clock at night, that means something's wrong, and I want to know what. She's 88 years old, and besides having a bad heart, high cholesterol, and arthritis, she has the vigor of a 50-year-old girl. I knew you would see this while I was gone, which is why I was going to hire a temp to fill in for me. She's just tired and it's getting worse. Her arms are cramping up, and I've had to increase her medication twice this year to keep her pain-free. What do the doctors say? Steve, she's on a maintenance program. She can't be cured. Only medication will make her life more tolerable. And don't you dare tell her I told you anything. She says it's her business and her business alone. She'll fire my ass if she even suspects I'm telling you or Catherine anything. So Catherine doesn't know anything either? The only thing she knows is that her mom is getting older. I give her the news weekly, but Esther makes sure I don't tell her the whole truth. Unless a divine act happens, she won't live to see her 90th birthday. If I felt bad before, it got much worse now. Both Mom and Dad had passed away years ago, and I hoped I wouldn't feel that pain again before it was my time to go. It looked like I would be out of luck. Dinner, as always, was great. I told everyone it was because I had almost cooked everything. I smiled and Lucy rolled her eyes. After dinner, I told Lucy to sit down, and I busied myself with clearing the table and washing the dishes. Standing over the sink, I regretted that we hadn't used paper plates. The dishwasher was overflowing with plates, pots, and serving dishes. I returned to the dining room carrying fresh coffee while everyone leaned back in their chairs and unbuttoned their pants. Well, at least I did. By 8 o'clock, Esther was dozing off, and by 9, she was in bed. Okay, what's up? Asked Catherine to me when we were finally alone. This is the first vacation I'll be spending not with my family, and it finally came to me yesterday morning. Taking her in my arms, I kissed her on the lips. However, having you here now at least makes it more bearable. I'm sorry about that. I remember what that first Christmas was like. My ex may have been an asshole, but it was still hard that first year. Is there anything I can do to make it easier for you? She asked, pulling my body closer to hers. Just holding you here and now is so much easier. That night we made unhurried, tender love. We weren't trying to knock each other down, we were just showing each other how much we missed each other. We had some issues to work out, and I put off discussing them until we could do it face to face. Thursday morning, I informed everyone that I would be gone most of the day. I was finishing up a Christmas delivery. Just like a man, waiting for the last minute to do the shopping. All 3 women admonished me. They didn't realize that I'd already picked out a gift for each of them and had just picked it up. I thought long and hard about each of them. Esther was the easiest to deal with. She loved music, and even though she could no longer dance, I got her the best gift. I gave her an Apple iPod with 1,000 songs from her generation. I figured she would never wear those little headphones, so I bought her Bose headphones. What I had spent on her was nothing compared to what she had done for me in the last 6 months. Lucy was Lucy, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. She wore the same uniform and hairstyle every day. Taking care of Esther was almost her life, and if I were in her shoes, I would miss the simple joys in life if I were a woman. So I booked her 12 spa sessions. They gave her full-body massages, hair, manicures, and other little things they do there. She deserved more, but I was on a budget and spent a lot more on the last gift. I more than liked Catherine. She was beautiful, smart, and fun to be with. We tried to avoid her mom like 2 teenagers doing something bad so as not to worry her. We thought we had to hide what we were doing from her. Hell, Catherine was her daughter and I was living with her mom at practically no rent. I didn't know how she'd take it, that I was fooling around with her daughter so what she didn't know wouldn't hurt her. Okay, so she wasn't stupid and saw right through us, or Lucy told her. I chose the week of March 27th because that's usually a lull in work at that time, and I knew that after a cold, miserable winter, Catherine would want to go somewhere warm. So, with a round-trip airline ticket and another ticket for a 7-day Caribbean cruise in my pocket, I made the return trip, stopping at the liquor store to pick up 2 bottles of wine. We always opened presents on Christmas Eve, even after the kids were separated. We'd eat dinner late, build a fire in the fireplace, put on some quiet music and see what others had bought us this year. No toasters or blenders from me. It was always something personal, from underwear to bath soap, perfume, or other specially selected items. Sarah always bought what she needed, so Christmas was all about things she didn't need but might want. I didn't care what she bought me because I was waiting for that same gleam in her eyes when she opened my presents. That look was a better gift than anything she could buy me. We didn't have a big dinner on Christmas Eve. Salad, vegetable casserole, and stuffed chicken breasts made up our dinner that night. The pecan pie was in the oven and became dessert after we opened our presents. I felt like a little kid. I was excited and almost bursting with anticipation, waiting for everyone to finally sit down in the living room. When everyone had gotten their presents under the tree, I announced that I would be playing Santa today. I knelt down and started pulling out one present at a time. As I thought, no one knew what I wanted, but they were close to it. Food items. You can never go wrong with those. Nuts, chocolate, wine, and exotic flavored jams. That's what I got. When Lucy opened her gift, her eyes sparkled. I think it was something she would never have bought for herself. When I told her they had a hot black masseuse, I think she blushed. Even though Esther was good with computers, she wasn't really into electronics. I showed her how the iPod was organized by artist, band, and type of music. When I fired it up and put the headphones on her ears, her eyes lit up. Elvis never sounded so good. I told Esther that I had a Bose docking station on order, and that all she had to do was plug her iPod into it and she could listen to music while recharging it. She gave me a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Now it was time for the final gift. I was going to give Catherine a surprise gift, but decided against it. When she opened the plane ticket, she smiled and said it would be a nice break from the cold. When I handed her the next envelope, she didn't expect anything else and looked back and forth at me and the envelope for a few seconds before opening it. She stared at the ticket, but I didn't see any immediate reaction and started to get a little worried. Had I misunderstood her intentions? And then it happened. The corners of her mouth lifted slightly and her eyes met mine. "For heaven's sake, girl, what's the matter?" her mother asked. "Just a little trip," she replied, now fully smiling and mouthing the words, "Thank you." Everyone thanked each other for the gifts, and while Lucy went to get dessert, Catherine sat down next to me. The little tongue kiss was the dessert I really needed, but the pecan pie with cold whip was my favorite. "I assume there's another ticket in my room?" she asked, looking me in the eye. "Well, it's a double room, and I wouldn't want you to be lonely by yourself." "And I assume it has a double bed?" "Of course it does. And I sure as hell hope you don't get seasick, because it's on one of the upper decks where there's a huge balcony. If you're interested, you can look on the computer to see what our room looks like in the 360 degrees it's got." "Steve, it's just a room, no matter how big or luxurious it is. It's whoever is in the room with you that makes it special." The pie was excellent, and a glass of Burgundy rounded out the evening. Instead of heading to the stores on the 26th for the sales, I wanted to show her some beach condos in Ormond and New Smyrna Beach that I'd been eyeing. "You're right. It's time for me to look into the future and figure out where I want to be in 2 to 10 years. I plan to stay in Florida, but I'd like to be closer to the water. I won't be able to find a place like this on the west coast of Florida, but it's more affordable here," I explained to her as we drove leisurely for 2 hours. All 3 two-bedroom condos were nice, but the maintenance fees surprised me. I guess both insurance and maintenance were much more expensive on the coast. But heck, the fees were more than I was paying for my house in Temple Gardens. I'd have to think about it some more. "What do you think about the beach areas? We could buy something and rent it out until we're ready to move there full-time. We could use it as an investment and maybe find a small single-family home because that's what I'd rather have." It looked like I was the one doing all the talking. "When do you plan on moving out of your mom's house?" "I don't have a specific date, but not until we get back from the cruise. I want to go through her house with a fine toothbrush and fix things up before I do. I think she likes having me around and I want to warn her about it so she doesn't think it was something she said or did that caused me to leave. I really care about your mom, and the more I have time to do, the easier it will be for Lucy to keep up with everything. I don't want you to leave because of what I said last time. I know you're not serving her, and you're right. My mom likes you. Speaking of which, now that I've trapped you, so to speak, where do you think we're going? I hoped I'd get the answer I wanted. Well, the first time I wasn't 100% sure and was more than a little intimidated by Thanksgiving, but now I think I finally know where you're going. I hope you mean we, I replied. You, me, we. It's all the same thing. I just don't know how a long-distance romance will work out. The distance between Florida and New Jersey can't be called insurmountable, but it's a long way away. And what if you find someone else? Say another hot old lady seduces you and takes you away from me? How hot is this girl you're thinking of? Short brown hair, 6 feet tall, small mole on her right cheek? It's a beauty mark, not a freaking mole. Okay, I'll correct that. A mole on her right cheek, nice looks, the sweetest lips I've ever kissed? Doesn't that describe her? Don't you know that love makes you deaf, dumb, blind, and stupid? She smiled. Now that we've dealt with that, what was your other question? The rest of the vacation thankfully went much more smoothly. On New Year's Eve, I took everyone downtown so we could celebrate New Year's Eve. I gave Esther a big kiss. She said it was high time I left her daughter for someone with much more experience. I even gave Lucy a big kiss and thanked her for taking care of me these past few months. With Catherine's departure, everything went back to normal, or whatever normal was now. I made a to-do list, and whenever Lucy found something she wanted to change, I always took the time to do it. Just before our cruise in March, Esther caught a cold and there was no way to get rid of it. I took her to every doctor in the area and finally took the day off and went to Orlando to see a specialist with Lucy in my arms. She had bronchitis, and thanks to medication and a nebulizer, she was staying on her feet. I added an air purifier and an extra heater to the bedroom to make it easier for her to breathe. I talked to Catherine about postponing our cruise, but Lucy and Esther didn't want to hear about it. Just go and have a good time. The damned cough won't drive me to my grave, for heaven's sake. Don't you know that only the good ones die young? Besides, you two need to be alone for once. Every time she comes here, you both babysit me. Go on, have fun with yourselves. I want to see Catherine walking on nothing but her feet when you get back. You know she loves you, don't you? That evening, I let Esther in on a little secret. Lucy, why don't you take the day off? I'll look after Esther and you can go out with your friends. I didn't have to ask her twice. I made her a cup of hot tea, no beer today, built a fire and sat on the chair next to her wheelchair. You know I love your daughter, don't you? Steve, how stupid do you think I am? I've known about you two since that first night. Hell, I'm the one who brought you two together. Okay, it's no secret I care about her. It's just that maybe you don't know how much. With those words, I pulled a small box out of my top pocket and opened it. If your husband were alive, I would ask him for his daughter's hand in marriage, but since there are two of us, you know what I want. Kinda small, isn't it? I cast a glance at her. Does she have any idea you're going to ask her? Probably not, but I'm not going to get a better chance than being alone with her for 7 days. How things will work out, I have no idea. The only thing I know for sure is that I want to marry your daughter so she can make an honest man out of me. Christ, she's going to turn to shit. Damn, I wish I could be there when you ask her. Don't worry, Mom. You'll probably listen to all the details over and over again if I know your daughter. You called me Mom. You'll officially be a mom in a little while, but to me, you've been one for quite some time. She started to cry. Just don't get sentimental on me. I'm not going to, it's just that I was hoping you'd be all mine. See what happens when I bring in another damn woman? She takes my man away. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. We talked until almost 10 o'clock. She was happy for me, or should I say the three of us. I hope she won't say no. Esther could hear the concern in my voice. If she refuses, she's a damn fool. And then I'll have you at my complete disposal. But don't worry, she won't say no. You're a catch for anyone. And if she happens to say she needs to think about it, I'll put 100 handsome widowers in front of you so she'll realize that if you snooze, you'll lose. Esther was used to getting what she wanted. Chapter 4. A New Union and Life Without Esther. By 8 in the morning, Catherine was already at the house, suitcases in hand. I had been up most of the night packing, or should I say packing everything I owned into one huge suitcase. And they also say women pack too much. Do you have everything in that suitcase? Everything except my Mustang, but we'll pick that up on the way. I smiled before I tried to lift the suitcase. Screw that, let the porters deal with it. Passport, driver's license, a bunch of cash, and one credit card was all I needed. I checked and rechecked the list the travel agency had sent me. The last thing I put in there was motion sickness pills. I wasn't going to take any chances. We said our goodbyes. Esther hugged me tightly and whispered, "Good luck," in my ear. It was a 5-minute cab ride to the warehouse and about a 3-hour drive to the harbor, so we had plenty of time to talk. This would be my first official cruise, and I was looking forward to it so much you wouldn't believe it. I put all of my valuables, including my ring, in a small backpack that I planned to keep with me until we were in the room. No misses if I could help it. Even express check-in took a while, and our bags didn't show up until after a stupid procedure called muster. I felt like I was on the Titanic, listening to them explain what we would have to do in the unlikely event that we had to leave the ship. We were going to the tropics, for goodness sake. How many icebergs could there be? I unpacked all of my things, hung them in their places, and put the rest away in my dresser drawers. Catherine hung up her 2 long dresses, and that was it. I work from my suitcase. I know where everything lies, so with the exception of toiletries, everything stays here. I guess she was already an old handywoman. We signed up for a few excursions, but mostly wanted to spend time alone. We walked around the ship, learned where everything was, and went back to the cabin. "Let's swim in the pool," she suggested. In her 54 years, Catherine looked more than good. If I didn't know any better, I would have sworn she was never a day over 40. More than once, she was looked at by both teenage boys and those much older than me. It got to the point where I didn't want to leave her alone for a second. When I went to the buffet to get us some fruit and a soft drink, there was a guy sitting on my lounger talking to her when I got back. Even through his dark sunglasses, I could see what he was looking at. I was standing there with both hands full of food when they finally noticed me. "Honey, you're back." "Steve, this is Dawn. Dawn, this is Steve." "Steve, I'd shake your hand, but it looks like you already have it." "Kate, maybe I'll see you again," he said as he stood up. "Kate," I said, looking at her. "Let me help you." She stood up and took both shot glasses. After that incident, I never left her side. We had a late dinner, so after changing into something more appropriate, we walked the decks until 8 o'clock. There was a crowd of people waiting to get into the dining room, but within 5 minutes we found our table and were seated. I ordered us drinks and a bottle of wine for dinner. There were 3 other couples sitting at our table. John and Tracy were in their early 50s, Linda and her new husband Paul were in their early 20s, and you could tell by just looking at them that they were newlyweds, or close to it. The third couple arrived late. Kevin was in his early 40s and his wife April was no more than 29. It looked like he had a trophy wife. We went around and introduced ourselves to each other and discovered that we came from different walks of life and were scattered all over the United States. When Catherine said this was my first cruise, everyone added their own tidbit about what I just had to do, but to each person they said it would be unforgettable. Dinner was long and drawn out. Finally, after finishing her wine, Catherine suggested we take a walk around the deck. And that's when my cruise went down the drain. All the damn exterior doors had steps to keep the water out during a storm. I opened the door and ran into one of them, falling flat on my face. Then, to top it all off, the door slammed on my foot. Embarrassment and shame don't even come close to describing what I felt. Catherine was trying to open the door again when the steward rushed to her aid. Feeling even more clumsy, everyone helped me up. It was then that I realized I had a bit of a problem, feeling pain in my right leg. A quick trip to the nurse's station confirmed that I had a slight ankle sprain. "Lay down for a couple days and you'll be good as new," the doctor instructed me. "Take 2 pills 3 times a day for a few days. Keep it elevated, and you'll be back on your feet in no time." He handed me a small bottle of pills that looked like large aspirins to me. "Great, just great," I muttered quietly to myself as I watched him put a bandage on my ankle. It hurt in a standing position, but it was manageable. "I can't take you anywhere, can I?" said Catherine, laughing. Looks like you're on bed rest. Not for the life of me. This is my first cruise, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it, even if it kills me. So we didn't stroll the decks that evening, but we did visit the clubs. We took a table near the dance floor, and I took an extra chair to keep my leg up. It was dark, and the music was really loud. The best thing we could do was watch other people dance. When Catherine was asked to dance by one or more guys, she always told them, "Thanks, but no thanks. Go ahead and dance, I'll be fine. It doesn't look like I'll be able to do anything for at least a couple days." Are you sure about that? Look, I know you like to dance. Have fun and don't worry about me. I'll just be a good cripple and sit here in the corner, I told her, sticking out my bottom lip. She blew me a kiss. Maybe we should go back to the room and dance something of our own. We'll have plenty of time for that tonight. Right now it's time to party. So for the next 2 hours, she went from one guy to another on the dance floor. She didn't dance a single slow song with any of them, but she did salsa with one of them. She really was a great dancer. We left the club around 30 o'clock at night. I haven't had this much fun in a long time, she said, glowing. We went back to the cabin, undressed and sat on the balcony, enjoying the night air. Holding her hand, I walked over to her, kissed her, and told her it was a good idea. We went back to the cabin, and with the balcony door ajar so we could hear the ocean, we made insanely passionate love and fell asleep in each other's arms. We never had breakfast in the dining room, but went to the Lido deck to have breakfast at the buffet. We docked in Key West in the morning, and she was looking forward to shopping downtown. It was crowded, and after an hour or so, my foot started to bother me. Kids, I need to go back while I can still do this. I could see she was disappointed. Look, you go shopping and have fun, and I'll meet you at the ship. Are you sure? I'm sure, I replied, giving her a big kiss. Just don't spend all your money on those overpriced tourist goods. She smiled, and I walked slowly back to the ship. What had taken us half an hour took me almost an hour. When I finally got to the ship, I was sore all over and sweating like a pig. I put ice on my ankle, kept it elevated, and popped 3 of those damn pills. At least from the balcony of my hotel room, I could see the pier and people walking to the ship. It was already 4:30 when I saw Catherine and 2 guys walking down the pier toward the ship. I recognized my new buddy Don, and who the other guy was with him, I could only guess. I think Don was right. He should have seen her around, and it looked like he did. She had probably 4 bags full of clothes, and for the next hour she showed me each item. When she pulled out a bright pink swimsuit the size of 2 cotton balls, I could tell by the look on my face that I was thinking about it. Loosen up. If you have it, show it. And if you don't, show what you have. This one I plan to wear on a special tanning bed. I looked puzzled. Steve, it's a topless tanning bed, for adults only. This time, I want to go home without a trace of a tan, and don't worry, you'll be right there with me. An hour later, we were on that deck with no outerwear. I liberally applied suntan lotion to the places that were pale white and hadn't seen the sun in a while. I let my hand slip a couple times, and all she told me was, later. When Dawn and the other guy I'd seen her with came upstairs, I wasn't too happy. Smiling broadly, she said, "You remember Dawn, and this is Paul. I met them both downtown today." "How's the leg, Steve?" he asked, looking at me through his dark glasses. "Much better. It'll probably be healed by tomorrow." I lied, but he didn't know that. As they sat next to Catherine and chatted nonstop, I started to get a little worried. When more than one guy started walking around and staring at her, I said it was time to leave. "You're going to get burned and ruin the rest of the cruise if I don't get you out of the sun." "You're probably right. We'll probably see you at the club tonight." She got up from the chaise lounge and put on her top. I didn't say anything. Dinner was fantastic, and of course we both ate more than we should have. I only had 1 glass of wine, especially after she said we should take a walk around the deck. I took 2 more pills and, although I was in pain, told her I was fine. I was still limping a bit, but got over it. The club was full, and we could only find a small table in the back. I danced 3 songs in a row, and after the last one, the slow one, a throbbing in my ankle let me know I was almost done. I had endured the best I could, and now I had to get off my foot. Sweat was rolling down my face, and I told her I needed to sit for a couple minutes. At that moment, Don appeared without sunglasses. He was no more than 40. And when he asked Catherine to dance, I told her to say yes. That was the last time I saw her for the next 2 hours. I take that back. She was on the floor with Don, Paul, and two other guys most of the night. She waved at me, but after 3 slow songs and too much drinking on my part, I wanted to get her off the floor. I headed toward the dance floor. She was talking to 2 guys. She had a drink in her hand, and it looked like it wasn't her first. One guy had his arm around her, and the other 2 were talking, laughing, and having a good time. "Honey, I think we should call it a night," I said, looking at the guy hugging her. He immediately pulled his hand away. "But it's still early, and I haven't danced this much in a million years," she said with pleading eyes. "There's always tomorrow night." I held out my hand to her. "Well, guys, I guess I'll see you tomorrow," she told them. But they didn't look too pleased. She had at least 1 drink and swayed to the music in the background all the way to our room. When we got into the room, she piled her whole body on top of me. "I want you so bad I can't stand it," she began, pulling her dress over her head. However, she slipped and ended up on her ass. That must have awakened something in her because she covered her mouth and ran to the bathroom. Dinner, and seemingly everything she had drunk that night came up. At least that's what it sounded like. I went out and sat on the balcony while she tried to recover. 10 minutes later, a woman came out of there with glassy eyes. "I think I drank too much tonight. Everyone was buying drinks and I must have lost count." I wanted to say, "Not at all, honey," but I held my tongue. Our romantic cruise wasn't working out the way I'd planned. Did we make love that night? Hell no. She left like a light 5 minutes later, snoring. I could only hope tomorrow would be better, but it wasn't to be. I left her to sleep and went to the cafeteria for breakfast. There was only a guy there with his trophy wife. He asked how my leg was and I said it was almost healed. I told him I planned to take it easy today and would probably be back to normal by tomorrow. We chatted about Key West and how his wife had maxed out 2 credit cards trying to single-handedly stimulate the economy. I laughed and said she wasn't the only one. We finished up, and I headed to my room but didn't find Catherine there. I spent the next hour and a half waddling around the decks looking for her. I went from the gym to the dining room and finally to the Lido deck. I looked everywhere for her. Finally, I found her on the deck, topless with her new best friend, Dawn. I was furious, and this time I didn't hide it. "I've been looking for you for the last 2 hours. You could have at least left me a note where you were going." "Well, I got up and you were gone." "You didn't leave me a note where you were going." "If you remember correctly, you were out and asleep," I replied, glad she couldn't see my eyes through my dark glasses. I shifted my gaze to Dawn. "Well, I see you found your new friend easily enough on this big ship," I told her sarcastically. "What the hell does that mean?" "Forget it," said I with disgust. "Maybe I should leave," Dawn said, about to get up. "You don't need to leave. Steve's just being a jerk. Get back in your seat." "That's right, Dawn. Sit back down." "If you need me, I'll be somewhere on the ship," I said sardonically, and walked away. She said something to me, but I was already halfway down the stairs and didn't hear. There really was a lot going on aboard the ship. Afternoon dance classes, auctions, gambling lessons, not to mention pool parties and games on the Lido deck. At the gym, I settled on the stationary bike, hoping it wouldn't hurt my ankle too much. It was pretty boring looking at the water across the bow of the ship, so I decided to sneak into the dry sauna and ended up in the hot tub with 4 other people. The hot water made my leg feel much better, but I was starting to get annoyed with Catherine. I returned to our room shortly after 4 o'clock. She wasn't there, and it looked like she hadn't been back since she left early that morning. I changed clothes and spent the next 2 hours at the art auction. You'd be surprised at the prices people pay for what I thought was junk. I guess when you're on vacation, you sometimes let your guard down, but not me. I got back to our cabin shortly before 7 and hit a hornet's nest. "Where the hell have you been? I've been all over the ship looking for you," she screamed at me. Where had I heard those words today? "I was about to tell the captain that you must have thrown yourself overboard." "Where have you been?" "Well, after I left you, I went to the gym, grabbed a bite to eat, and then spent the next few hours between gambling seminars and an art auction." "Why didn't you come back?" "And ruin your good time? I wouldn't dream of it." She heard the bitterness in my voice. "You're starting to act like a real ass. There's nothing I can do about the fact that you fell and hurt your damn ankle." Let's just leave it at that and go get some dinner, okay? We showered separately and dressed in silence. I don't think we said more than 5 words to each other on the way to dinner. Everyone was discussing our next port of call and what they planned to do. We had signed up for an excursion to see the ruins, and I was looking forward to it. When Don stopped by our table and told Catherine that he would love to show her the ruins since I wasn't working, I almost freaked out. He was hitting on her when I was around. No need, Don. My leg is already healed and I'll show her them myself. I threw him a look that basically told him to back off. As usual, we headed to one of the 2 clubs. There, the guys she had danced with the previous nights were sitting at a large table, and against my better judgment, she talked me into sitting with them. We had 2 drinks each and I danced with her for more than half the songs. I was paying for my drink when one of the guys asked Catherine to dance. "Why don't you find another girl to dance with?" I said. She wasn't too happy about the remark and said she'd love to dance, giving me an unkind look. And so the night passed. An hour later, when another smiling guy asked her to dance, I told him to back off in exactly these terms. "Steve, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting like this?" If she didn't already know the obvious, my answer to her question wouldn't change anything. I seemed to lose my temper and held out my room card to him. "Here's my room key. You can have it too," I said loudly to the surprised group at our table. "Just don't forget to wash it when you're done with it. Have fun, guys, because I'm out of here." At this point, they were all catching flies. I was halfway to the exit when an excited Catherine caught up with me. "What the hell is your problem, Steve? The way you're acting, I'd think you were my father." "No, not your father, but I was at least hoping your lover was. Go back to your toys and leave me alone. Looks like this cruise wasn't such a good idea. Stay here and let me go back for my stuff so we can talk." "About what? Remember when you said you had bad cruises with your ex because all he did was hit on this and that woman? Now I think I know how you felt." I continued to walk away, hearing her yelling at me to wait for her to come back. One woman had already ripped my heart out. I wasn't about to give that chance to another. I sat at the bar outside the casino for the next 2 hours. After that, I went into the casino where I blew a couple hundred. It just wasn't my night. After that, I went up to the upper deck and, with a deuce in each hand, continued the blitz. In all my years of drinking, I'd never once passed out, but that night it happened. I woke up with a throbbing head. My mouth felt like shit and I fought the urge to open my eyes. The only thing I noticed was that someone had thrown a blanket over me. Very cautiously, I opened my eyes. I had no idea what time it was, but I knew from my senses that I was alive. Dead people weren't supposed to be in this much pain. I pulled myself up into a sitting position and rubbed my eyes, finally glancing at the clock. 7:30. And then I saw her. She was still asleep in the chaise lounge next to mine under a blanket. I looked at her, remembered last night, and shuddered. I didn't remember much about the last few hours, but I clearly remembered our last conversation, and I couldn't wait to see what it would be about this morning. I considered all the options, listing them in my head. Get another room, pack up and leave on today's flight, or just endure the last 4 days together. But the last option didn't appeal to me much. When she hissed, I didn't have time to think about the other options anymore. "Are you alive?" "Determine if I'm alive. I'm upright, breathing, but I'm hungover as hell besides, I'm not sure." "I waited for you in our room, and when you didn't return by 12, I called 2 stewards to help me find you. I was frightened because it seemed to me that you weren't even breathing when we found you. They said you had passed out and brought me a couple of blankets. Don't you ever do that again, do you hear me?" "Why?" "What do you mean, why?" "It's not a hard question, at least it wasn't like that before." "I care about you, that's why," she replied. "Like you care about a pet or something?" "I think you're still drunk because you're missing the point. Catherine, what are we? We used to be lovers and I thought we were much more, but after 3 days on this cruise, I'm not so sure anymore. I'm too old to play cat and mouse. I've told you how I feel more than once, and if you don't feel the same way, well, fine. Life is too short for me to pine for some woman who doesn't reciprocate my feelings. I think it's wise if we break up now, and that way we can remain friends before something else happens between us and I get angry like I did last night." "Are you sure that first day you fell you only bruised your ankle and not your head? I love you, how can you doubt that? I'm not the kind of girl who jumps into bed with the first guy she meets in case you haven't noticed. I know, but the last few nights you've been ignoring me because of your new hangout. I meant it when I said I understood how you felt when your husband was hitting on all those women. You've been hit on by 4 or 5 guys in the last 3 days in case you hadn't noticed. I realized one thing about myself. I'm a very selfish and jealous lover. Steve, there are 6 of them, and you don't have to worry about any of them. Please don't talk to me like I'm some naive child. I've seen you. Now she was laughing and looking at me. I don't think it's very funny, I said, getting angry again. Steve, they're all gay. They're dance instructors from Minneapolis, Denver, and Newark. And in case you haven't noticed, there are 10 other couples in there along with them. Gays? Yes, gay. Don put this little group together, and he wasn't looking at me. He was probably looking at you. She started laughing again. You can imagine their surprise at your little outburst last night. Look, I love you, and I want to be with you, but how we're going to figure that out, I have no idea. So if you'll stop being mad at me, I know something we haven't done since we've been on this damn boat, and I'm going to change that right now. We walked past the ruins and spent the rest of the day in our cabin. I can confirm that one of those little showers can fit 2 people, but the bathroom flooded with water. By the time we were getting dressed for dinner, we were completely out of clean towels. And that night at dinner, she was wearing a dress that hid almost nothing, and everyone, and I mean everyone, the men in the dining room looked over at her as she walked by. When she smiled and whispered that she wasn't wearing any underwear, I quickly groped her to check. She spread her legs slightly, and I felt her warm, bald bump. I got a hard-on. The food was great, as usual, and the conversation was lively until we got to dessert, at which point I got down to business. She turned her head to speak to the woman next to her, and on her empty plate I placed the ring box. To my horror, when she turned around, Catherine didn't even notice it, but almost everyone else at our table did. I tried to contain my excitement. As the desserts began to be brought out, she finally lowered her gaze to her plate. I tried not to look at her as she opened the ring box and freaked out. She grabbed me, kissed me, and jumped into my lap. I picked her up, got down on one knee, and proposed. She wept. Yes, yes, hell yes, came out of her mouth. Everyone at our table and all the tables around us started clapping and congratulating us. Someone ordered a couple bottles of champagne, and we closed the dining room. She kept her eyes on the ring. It was white gold, just over 3/4 of a carat, and it was decorated with baguettes on both sides. As we passed the club, she told me to wait there for 1 minute. 6 loud and crazy guys came running out, talking all at once, and started shaking my hand. You're lucky, you know that? Each of them said to me. I agreed and apologized for my outburst the night before. By the time we left, we were all friends again. Nevertheless, we talked until the wee hours of the morning about the who, what, where, when, and why of our relationship and life together. Since we were going to do this, we had a lot of details to work out. That morning, we skipped breakfast again. In shorts, t-shirts, and flip-flops, we headed to the Lido deck to get breakfast. We ate inside, and even though we were seated in a corner booth, more than one person came up and congratulated us on our engagement. Why don't we both quit our jobs and live for love? I suggested. Suggested I. We could do that if we were in our 20s, but it would be a little difficult now. We decided that we both wanted to be as close to the beach as possible, but the condo option didn't suit either of us. We might not be able to get exactly what we wanted, but basically it wouldn't take much for the 2 of us. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and a large terrace were all fine with me. However, she said we had to have a pool with a mesh fence to keep the bugs out and a hot tub. Yeah, you know my mom won't be too surprised, and she's been putting us together since before I even got here. I laughed. That's Esther. She gets everything she wants, one way or another. I guess I'm like my mother in that, she said, squeezing my hand. I got what I wanted. We kissed again. Or should I say still kissed? At dinner, we were still the big news in the dining room. The captain and dining room steward came over and personally congratulated us. For dessert, they brought out a cake with our names on it. The taste was heavenly, and everyone raved about how delicious the cake was. We shared what was left over with a neighboring table, and one couple said they were going to remarry if we could get another cake just as delicious. We spent the last 2 days devouring each other. Catherine was scheduled to fly home the morning after we returned, and I was scheduled to leave for work Monday morning. We wouldn't have any more time together. I was in no hurry to leave the ship. We picked up our luggage, loaded up, and within an hour we were on our way. Our hands never left each other's sides. I pulled up to Esther's house shortly after 1 o'clock, and it looked like they were waiting for us because they were sitting in the living room just talking. "How's it going?" "We broke up, Mom. We decided that neither of us could handle a long-distance affair without going crazy. Maybe in a couple years we'll think about it again," she said, before bursting into laughter and running up to her mother to show her the ring. Lucy only smiled. We ate a light lunch, because after eating everything that wasn't stocked on the cruise, I would have to lose a couple pounds. She recounted the events of our cruise, including my little outburst to her new gay friends. "Steve, I'm surprised you didn't flog them," Esther exclaimed. "My husband would have. There's no way he would have put up with the crap she put you through. Now the big question is, when should I plan the wedding?" We looked at each other. "Mom, that's the $10,000 question. We still haven't even decided how and where we're going to live, let alone get married." "Well, I'm not getting any younger, and won't you feel like I'm going to die before you get married? I don't see what the big deal is. It's not like we're going to invite 1,000,000 people. Steve has a couple kids and a few friends, and your whole family's here. I'm guessing 50 people, no more, and heck, we can set it up here at the house if you want." That wasn't a bad idea, I thought to myself. A wedding this weekend, and then we could always go on our honeymoon, just not on a cruise. This time, no one, gay or straight, was to come within 10 feet of my bride. We spent the night in bed discussing just that. "Easter weekend," we told them at breakfast. "We'll both have Good Friday off and we can get married on Saturday," Catherine told her mom. "That way, everyone will be free and we'll have our honeymoon in June." The date was set, and the plans went into motion. Esther was over the moon. She, Catherine, and Lucy were planning the wedding. I gave them leeway and let Catherine discuss the details with her mom. I told the kids, and they said they would definitely come. They planned to stay with Mom, and no, she was not invited. Within a month, all the plans were made. The food, cake, DJ, justice of the peace, and even the bartender were all set. We had gotten our marriage license, and all we had to do was wait for the date. I was spoiled by having her by my side every day during the cruise. Looking at each other on the computer screen was okay, but not like the real thing. 3 weekends later, I did sneak over to her place to surprise her when she got home from work. We spent the weekend in bed and lived a life of love. Pizza Hut pizza, beer, and wine. I counted down the days. Esther was like the old Esther, full of rage and vinegar, taking no prisoners. We went out to the town square, and she didn't fail to let everyone and anyone know that her daughter was marrying a real handsome and top guy on 2 damn legs, Mo, as she put it. Sarah never once came up to congratulate me. I think the reason was obvious. The closer we got to the wedding, the more tired Esther looked. I worried that she was overloading herself, but she said she hadn't felt so alive in a long time. "What can I do to help?" was the only thing that came out of my mouth to Lucy. "I don't want this wedding to kill her, do you understand?" "Steve, it's already done. The only thing everyone needs to do is show up. I have everything on autopilot as we speak. And it's just that she looks weak and tired again, and I'm worried. You and I must look so good at 88. Look, I already told you the doctor is doing everything modern medicine can do, and I don't even wake her up after her afternoon nap anymore. She needs more rest, but she's fighting me. Something about her getting everything she needs after she's dead and gone." I told Lucy I would talk to her tonight at dinner. "Mom, you're starting to look a little droopy. Are you feeling okay? I can still run circles around you, and don't get me started about drinking you under the table. Don't worry, I'm having a damn wedding, and don't worry, I'm not going to die on you." She was still gently letting me know that she was fine. I let that pass my ears, but kept my eyes on her. "What's that stuff next to the beer?" she shouted at me Saturday night. "That shit tastes like warm rabbit piss." "Esther, do you even know what rabbit piss tastes like?" "Hell yes, I do, and so does this shit. Now pour me some O'Doul's and bring me my bud." I did as ordered, but only gave her 1 serving, which she didn't like either. On the day of the wedding, it was drizzling rain. I was wearing a suit, but not a tuxedo, and Catherine was wearing an almond-colored floor-length dress. After the "I agree" was done, The party began. We took enough pictures to create an album of memories that will stay with us for a lifetime. I especially made sure we had good pictures of her mom and us, as well as one of the two of us that we could hang on the mantle. My kids were happy for us and welcomed Catherine into the family. Lucy watched Esther like a hawk, and I danced with her in her stroller. She had tears in her eyes as she told us how happy she was for us and that she could now die a happy woman. We both told her that she would probably outlive us both. But looking at Lucy, I wasn't so sure. When I told her I was looking at an apartment, I thought she was going to have a coronary. What, you're going to come here, knock up my daughter and leave? Catherine's a little old for me to knock her up, and I think I've put you off long enough. Your family, for heaven's sake. Who the hell am I going to have fun with? With Lucy? Hell, she's a lightweight at best. You're staying here, and I don't want to hear a word about you leaving. I called Catherine. Steve, if she wants you to stay, why don't you just stay, at least for a while? Besides, Lucy said Mom still doesn't look well, and I'm a little worried. Besides, if you're around, I'll sleep a lot better knowing that you can handle any emergency. How are you holding up? Other than walking around with a constant boner, no problems. You were spoiled that week on the cruise. I couldn't argue with her about that. I have a realtor looking at a small place on the beach or a block away. I've pointed out to her the 50-mile range we're interested in. So if she finds something, I'll have her email you a picture. I miss you, I told her. I miss you too, but it's not forever, and besides, doesn't absence make the heart grow fonder? Not in my book. She laughed and told me to take a cold shower. Maybe we can make another video if you know what I mean. I reminded her of that option. You're a dirty boy. I gave you a little taste and now you want to feed on it regularly. Maybe this weekend if you behave. I couldn't wait. 2 weeks later, Esther, Lucy, and I returned to Orlando for another visit with her specialists. She needs more rest, and if she doesn't, I'll have to hospitalize her, the doctor told Lucy and me. Her sugar levels are too high, and she's lost 2 pounds since the last time I saw her. Tell her not to drink beer and to eat more. Apparently, the doctor didn't know Esther very well. A cup of hot green tea after dinner was not to her liking. She wanted a bud. Look, Mom, if we don't gain weight and get our sugar back to normal, the doctor's going to put you in the damn hospital. Do you want that? Screw all of them. I'm not going to live forever, but I'm not going to eat porridge and drink Japanese juice. Now get me a goddamn beer. I brought her a half glass of Bud Light. Catherine flew over to look at the 2 places the realtor had suggested, but neither of them suited us. We set some new parameters and told her to try again, but Catherine said she wouldn't mind the townhouse. We had a nice time and tried to fit the week into 2 days. She left with legs, but with a smile. The summer heat had abated, and with it Esther's health. I gave Catherine the latest news every day, and even Lucy was concerned, though she tried not to show it. After some serious arguments, she was admitted to the hospital for observation. She was still losing weight because her appetite was almost completely gone. When she had a feeding tube inserted, I thought she was going to have a cow. Sometime around 9 o'clock on Thursday night, I was reading a car magazine and sitting next to her bed. I thought she was asleep when I felt a bony hand on my arm. I told you I had plans for you, but you never believed me, did you? She said in a weak voice, but with a sly smile. You may not believe it, but Mother still knows best. You are a lovely couple, and for the first time since I met you, I know you are happy. And I guess I can thank you for that, I added. Now, why don't you go to bed before one of the nurses slips a sleeping pill into your feeding tube? I'd rather you pour me a bud. We exchanged smiles. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. I told her I wasn't going anywhere and would be there for her when she woke up. Gently squeezing my hand and smiling weakly, she closed her eyes. I didn't feel like calling that morning. I still had tears in my eyes, and Lucy had been in the hospital all night. I called a friend and asked him to take Lucy back to the house. She was completely exhausted and devoid of any emotion after the long night. I told Lucy I would see her later. Hi, kids, Catherine said, all glowing with happiness. Thinking about me? I was definitely thinking about you last night. I think I burned 2 batteries just this night alone. It couldn't have been easier to say. Honey, your mom died last night. I heard the phone hit the floor. Sobs were heard, then crying. Finally, I heard her ask how and when. She died in her sleep last night. There was no pain. We talked, and when I told her to go to bed, she closed her eyes and never woke up again. Your ticket is waiting for you at the southeastern counter at the airport. The earliest flight is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm so sorry, hon, I just don't know what to say. Please take a cab to the airport. I don't want you to drive, and I'll meet you when you get there. We talked for a few more minutes before she reminded me that she had to go and make plans to leave. I called her every hour until she got on the plane. By the time she threw herself into my arms, the makeup had already come off her face. Although we all expected it sooner or later, it didn't make it any easier. She cried on my shoulder, and I tried my best to be strong for her, but I was dying inside myself. I handed her my handkerchief and we drove in silence to the house. Esther had already planned her funeral in advance, knowing that everyone would be horrified. The funeral home picked up the body by 9 the next morning. We were told that Catherine would be able to see her mother the next morning, but please call first. Lucy showed me the contents of the large manila envelope Esther had given her just in case. The coffin, the plot, and even the newspaper issue were all ready. The only thing I hadn't touched was the thick envelope with Catherine's name on it. At the top it said, "Please read alone." We ate some of the leftovers Lucy kept in the fridge, but no one had much of an appetite. I drank 2 glasses of wine and Catherine sat next to me and finished the leftovers from the bottle. I repeated Esther's last words to her a dozen times, and each time she cried, telling me how much she would miss her. I tucked my wife into bed and sat sipping a glass of wine, looking at the fire in the fireplace. The next few days would be hectic, and then the reality of life without Esther would set in. I missed her already. Her feisty and sharp tongue always made me laugh, or at least embarrassed me when we were out and about. My next thought was Lucy. She no longer had a job or a home. I'd have to talk to Catherine about it. There was no way I wanted to put her out on the street. She'd lived with Esther for over 10 years and loved her like her own mother. When I blinked the next time, the sun was already up and Catherine was standing in front of me. "You sat up all night? You'll be dead by tonight." "Are you okay?" I asked. "No, and probably won't be for a while, but at least Mom is at peace. I guess I never really thought about what it would be like without her. I thought she would always be there for me. Now I feel guilty for not visiting her more often or being nicer to her." I took her head off my shoulder and placed both hands on her face and kissed her. "You meant the world to her. She loved you more than I think you'll ever know. Don't think about what ifs. Just be grateful for the time you had with her." Touching my forehead with hers, she told me she loved me and that we would get through this together. I carried her back to bed, and the screening turned out to be much bigger than everyone expected. Everyone was full and they had to extend their hours of operation to accommodate everyone who wanted to pay their respects. They came in cars, buses, and limousines. They came inside, some with walkers, others in wheelchairs. I recognized many of the people I had met the night before in the square, and everyone said she would be missed. Several people congratulated me on my wedding and remarked on what a wonderful wife and daughter Catherine had become. It seemed that even though she hadn't spent much time with her mother in Florida, these women remembered what she looked like in her 30s and 40s, especially those who were close to Esther. There wasn't a dry eye in the house during the service. After the formal service, Catherine wanted to leave the family for a few minutes so we could say goodbye to her in private. Standing next to Catherine and Lucy, we whispered to Esther how much she would be missed. Catherine touched her face, kissed her, and slipped a letter into her hands. The funeral agent quietly closed the lid of the casket and carried it to the limousine waiting for us. We drove to the cemetery in silence. Although Catherine didn't watch the casket being lowered into the ground, she managed to hold still long enough to get through the rest of it. Afterward, we drove Lucy home and just rode around for a long time, just the two of us. Catherine said she hoped to return to the cemetery in a few days to say goodbye to her, but felt she needed time to recover before that happened. Back in Temple Gardens, we tried to have dinner at one of the restaurants in the square, but after a 10th person came up to us and said he was sorry for our loss, we left. I took her to a small establishment off the road and was finally able to eat dinner in peace. After dinner, we just drove and ended up at a secluded motel on the beach. We walked along the water and sat on the sand listening to the waves until just before midnight. There was an emptiness in her that I tried my hardest to fill, but I knew only time could do that. I let her sleep, found a little restaurant on the road, and brought her breakfast. She had hardly eaten anything, and I hoped that this morning I would be able to get her to eat at least a little. "Good morning, Mrs. Moore," I said, kissing her nose. "I've been cooking for hours, so you should at least try to eat something this morning." I made coffee and bagels while she cooked bacon. I was a little hungry that morning, and it looked like she was too, which was a good sign. "Steve, I want to go visit Mom's grave after breakfast, if that's okay with you." "No problem, and I think it would be fun if we stopped by the storage unit, picked up my Mustang, and took it for a ride afterward. Maybe I'll even let you drive it." "Steve, why don't you just take it out of the damn storage unit and leave it in the house once and for all? It's stupid to take it every other month for a drive. A car like that is meant to be driven. If it were mine, I'd drive it to and from work every day." "Kids, it's a classic and I don't want to put miles on it. Someday it'll be worth a penny. That's if it doesn't have a bunch of miles on it." I think my words went in one ear, and out of the other she told me, "Whatever you say." In the cemetery we cried. It was still too wet, and it would take a long time for the pain to heal. I hugged her, told her how much I loved her, and that I would do everything in my power to make her feel whole again. "You really do love me, don't you?" she asked. "It's not just lust or that I'm filling the gap left by your ex-wife. You love me for who I am." Remember these words, "in sickness and in health, until death do us part"? I meant every word. I kissed her moist, salty lips. She hugged me and smiled, and I finally got rid of my doubts, if she had any. "Did you know my mom really liked you?" she said, driving my Mustang back from the cemetery while I grimaced and watched the road until we pulled into the driveway 10 minutes later and continued our conversation in our bedroom. "Like I said, Mom really liked you," she said, putting on something more comfortable that she could lounge around the house in. "I know that, and I loved her too." "No, I mean she really, really liked you. In her eyes, you walked on water. You must have made one hell of a first impression on her. She said you were the most loving and devoted man she'd ever met, aside from my father, and that's saying something. I thought back to the first couple times we'd met, and other than buying her a beer or chatting with her about nonsense, there hadn't been much to our encounters. She said that after you found out about your wife cheating on you, she came up with this scheme to set you and me up." "When did all this happen?" "I think between the time you left your wife and the time she planned the trip for me to come here." "Why, that little shit. She planned everything, right down to what rooms we would be staying in. Steve, she knew I like to swim at night and that you do too. I just didn't realize you were doing it in the cafeteria." "Disappointed?" "Not at all," she said, squeezing my hand. "You never told me you told her you were going to propose to me on the cruise." "It was our little secret. I felt I owed it to her after all. You were her only daughter, and I respected her enough to tell her beforehand." "Well, that, I suppose, cemented it in her eyes at any rate." "And did she tell you that if you refused, she would set me up with 100 lonely widows she knows?" "I told her as I tell you now, in your dreams. You are mine, and I do not share. You can't imagine how good that makes me feel. I don't know what arrangements your mom has made for Lucy, but I'd like to do something for her. I've got some money stashed away, and I'd like to create a sort of nest egg for her, so to speak. She wasn't just a nanny or caregiver for your mom. She really cared for her." I hoped I wasn't stepping on anyone's toes or out of line. Mom was right. You really are a good person. That's what she liked about you. You really care about others and are willing to reach into your own pocket to help someone you never met until a year and a half ago. You're really something, you know that? Well, what do you think? She won't end up on Easy Street, but she won't have to take care of anyone else unless she wants to. I waited. My mom already took care of Lucy. She won't have to worry about anything else. "Mr. Moore, have I ever told you how much I love you?" "Not often, but I'll work on you until you get there." "Now, the hard part is us," she said in a serious tone. "Before you say a word, I have a crazy idea I want to discuss with you. With half the value of my house, pension, and what I'll be getting at 62, I'm thinking of quitting my job at 62 and moving up north with you. I know it's a long way off, but that way we'll be close to each other and won't have to worry about when and how we'll be together. I know I can find something to do up north that will fill my days and bring in a few dollars. In the meantime, we can look for a place to vacation here at the beach. What do you say? You hate cold weather. I love you more than the cold, and eventually we'll have all these cool nights to keep each other warm. What do you say? I hate it. You're going to be miserable up north, and the only reason you're doing this is because of me. That way I can keep my job and you can quit yours. Honey, we'd be together. I can't bear the thought of you not being with me all the time. It's a small price to pay for our happiness. Okay, how about this? I'll tender my resignation from my job and move here to my mom's house. That way we'll be warm all the time, and more importantly, we'll be together. I like your idea a lot better, and I think even if you don't work, we can manage. I don't know how much your mom still owes on that apartment, but it can't be that terribly much. I kissed her and started to smile in a friendly way. Let's celebrate. Not so fast, kid. We still have one thing to discuss that most newly married couples tend to worry about. I propose that we pool our money and take responsibility for paying the bills and managing our money. I do this for a living and probably have a much better understanding of it than you do. Okay, that was easy. Now can we fool around? Don't you have any questions? Don't you want to know how much I make a month? Don't you feel that when I dispose of you like this, you become less of a man? I love and trust you infinitely. I know you'll never let me down. Just don't yell at me if I go over budget. She looked at me and laughed. That went a lot easier than I thought it would. We made love, and this time I made her scream. I counted 3 climaxes, which was a new record for me, or at least the best in the last 10 years. I was panting, and Catherine was flushed and fanning herself while we both enjoyed the aftertaste. Wow, if this is how you act when I take over, I'm going to have to do it more often. You don't have to take on anything. I want you with me, and that, my wife, is worth everything I have. Are you sure about that? Yes, no doubt about it. Good, but it's going to take me more than a few days to get rid of $22 million. She gave me a big shit-eating grin. What did you say? 22 what? Millions. My mom left me a trust fund, and there's a little over 22 in it. Well, then we can give Lucy more than I thought. Steve, she doesn't need our money. Mom left her $2 million in a new apartment. Steve, I realized a long time ago what kind of man you are. I just didn't want to step on your manhood without asking you. So you submit your application, I submit mine, and we find a little shack on the beach with a pool. After that day, life got a lot easier. Now every night I mentally quietly thanked Esther and remembered the words she always said to me. Steve, I have plans for you. I guess she did. Guys, I'm currently experiencing some problems with this channel. For this purpose, I have created a second channel, which will soon publish videos even more often than this one. The link will be in the description or in the comments. You can subscribe to my new channel right away. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video.